Midnight vaults, locked ledgers, whispers traded in candlelight. Behind marble walls and golden altars, there are secrets the Vatican has guarded for centuries. Lost gospels, forbidden rituals, silenced voices, and fortunes hidden in plain sight. What has been buried, and why? The answers may change everything you thought you knew about faith, power, and the church itself. We begin inside a quiet corridor, where steps echo and keys hang heavy on a single ring. Past the tourist lines and frescoed light, there's another world. Rooms of sealed files, private letters, and stories that do not fit the public face of faith. This book is not rage. It is a lamp. We are not here to shout. We are here to look, to listen, and to ask straight questions. Why were some texts praised while others vanished? Why do certain vaults exist at all? Why do patterns repeat across centuries? Rituals in shadow, money trails that bend, and voices that go missing. You will hear of hidden archives and redacted pages. You will meet saints with doubts, popes with rivals, and artists who tucked warnings into paint and stone. You will learn how a simple symbol can speak a full sentence, how a line in a ledger can move armies, and how silence, kept long enough, becomes a kind of rule. This is not a court. It is a map. We mark the paths many have hinted at. Forbidden rites, secret orders, buried scandals, and the slow burn of cover and control. We will say clearly when something is confirmed, and clearly when it is a claim, rumor, or theory. We keep our language plain so the ideas stay sharp. We keep the pace quick so the signal is never lost to noise. You may come out surprised. You may come out angry. You may come out with a better way to tell truth from tale. Whatever you find, keep your lamp lit. The deeper rooms are ahead and the air grows colder. Hold your breath. We're going in. Imagine the sound of footsteps echoing inside stone walls built 5 centuries ago. It is night, and the tourist gates have long since closed. The piazza is silent, the floodlights casting long shadows against the colonnade. Past the marble steps, behind doors that rarely open to the public, the Vatican reveals its second face, not the cathedral of worship, but the fortress of secrecy. The corridors here breathe differently. Air feels heavy, as if weighed down by everything unsaid. In this place, silence is power. Silence is policy. You learn that quickly. It is not the statues or the stained glass that command respect, but the locked doors, the sealed drawers, the cabinets with coded numbers. These walls hold more than devotion. They hold decisions, bargains, scandals, and suppressed truths. Every archbishop, every pope, every cardinal, each one adds to the chain of secrecy that stretches back centuries. And always there is the key ring. You might picture it simply, a cluster of iron keys hanging heavy at the waist of a guard, jingling faintly with each step. But the key ring is more than metal. It is a symbol. Every door opened, every door closed, determines who knows what and who remains in the dark. There are archives stacked with millions of pages that only a handful of people are allowed to touch. A letter written in the Middle Ages that could shift how we understand history sits locked away, while the world outside hears only fragments. The Vatican is not careless. Secrecy is methodical, planned, deliberate. Access is a hierarchy. Not even the highest scholar can wander without clearance. Requests are reviewed, files approved or denied. A historian may wait years for a single document, only to find names crossed out, dates blurred, and entire paragraphs missing. It is not paranoia to wonder why. Why guard centuries-old letters if they no longer matter? Why lock away journals from popes long gone, unless those pages still carry heat? The official answer is preservation. The paper is fragile. The ink fades. The archives protect knowledge from the careless hand of time. And yet, preservation alone cannot explain the patterns, the stories of files requested and refused, the whispers of rooms within rooms, collections that are not yet catalogued, though they have sat for centuries. Power hides best in plain sight, and here, the key ring decides. Who enters the library of secrets? Who turns the brass knob on the oak door? Who flips the brittle page? The church is older than nations, richer than kingdoms, more enduring than empires. Its greatest strength has never been its armies or its wealth, but its control of knowledge. To know something before the world does, and to decide when or if that knowledge is released. This is the real key. Consider the stories of historians turned away. A scholar seeking files on the Inquisition may be told to return in 5 years, maybe 10. By then, the questions have cooled. A journalist tracing the Vatican's finances might receive a polite letter. Unavailable at this time. That time never seems to end. Even those who do gain entry describe a labyrinth. Shelves that run for miles, guarded by silence, with entire collections that no guide will acknowledge. This is how secrets survive centuries, not by being burned or erased, but by being delayed, deferred, hidden behind polite refusals and procedural walls. Silence does the work of denial, without the noise of confrontation. The key ring is heavy because each key carries a burden, the power to reveal and the duty to conceal. Imagine a single file, thin, perhaps a letter or a ledger page. Released today, it could spark headlines across the world. Locked away, it remains harmless. Multiply that by thousands, by millions. Suddenly you understand. The Vatican holds the largest cache of silences in human history. And so, Chapter 1 begins here, with a walk down the corridor, the ring of keys at the waist of a guard, the quiet weight of doors unopened. Before we can see the specific secrets, the lost gospels, the forbidden rituals, the buried scandals, we must understand the structure of hiding. Secrets do not survive by chance. They survive because someone holds the key, and someone else does not. And in this city-state within Rome, that division has been perfected into an art form. The world outside imagines the Vatican as holy ground. But within these walls, holiness shares space with politics, ambition, and fear. Every lock tells a story. Every refusal to open is a decision that shapes what billions believe. What you are allowed to see defines what you think is true. And what remains hidden still breathes in the dark, waiting. You may never touch the key ring, but knowing it exists is the first step. The door has not opened yet, but you are standing before it now. Secrets are not told plainly. They are coded in silence, written between lines, disguised in ritual, and whispered in contradictions. If you wish to navigate the Vatican's darkest corners, you must first learn how to read a secret. Start with absence. What is missing? A record begins in 1925 and ends abruptly in 1939. Why? A saint's life story is told in rich detail, but entire years are left blank. Why? Gaps speak louder than entries. The Vatican's archives are riddled with these gaps, and to trained eyes, absence itself becomes evidence. Then look at language. Official decrees are crafted with precision. Every phrase is deliberate, every omission calculated. When a document says certain materials have been withdrawn for review, it rarely means misplacement. It means someone feared what those pages could reveal. Words like unsuitable, unverified, or pending evaluation are not casual. They are shields. Behind them lies what someone does not want you to see. The Vatican also communicates through ritual and symbol. A painting is more than color. A statue is more than stone. Artists, unable to speak openly, often slipped warnings into their work. A glance turned away from the altar, a hand raised not in blessing but in caution. To those trained in reading symbols, sacred art can look like a long, quiet rebellion. Michelangelo's figures, for example, have been studied for their hidden critiques of church power. Bernini's sculptures whisper of meanings never spoken aloud. Silence itself is a language. Notice when a question receives no answer. Notice when officials say, no comment. In ordinary life, silence may be politeness. In the Vatican, silence is strategy. It keeps suspicion alive without confirming anything. It stalls until interest fades. It protects without defending. Secrets also thrive in contradiction. If two officials give conflicting statements, the truth may hide in the space between them. One says, it never happened. Another says, it happened differently. Together, they tell you more than either intended. Inconsistency is the fingerprint of a hidden truth. And then there is timing. Information, when finally released, often arrives too late to matter. A file about wartime choices appears 80 years after decisions were made. By then, the players are gone, the anger cooled, the consequences absorbed. The Vatican understands time as a weapon. Delay is as effective as denial. To read a secret is to sharpen your senses. Do not take stories at face value. Ask why this document was chosen, why that word was erased, why another never surfaced. Every archive has dust, but not every gap is dust. Some gaps are designed. The reader of secrets must hold two truths at once: what is said and what is not. Both are real. Both shape belief. And the Vatican, master of narratives, has spent centuries weaving what the world sees and what it does not. When you walk into these chapters, remember this training. You will not always find direct confession. More often, you will find fragments, patterns, silences, and contradictions. The story of the Vatican is not one of open diaries, but of layered veils. Learning to read those veils is the only way forward. Behind reinforced doors and hushed corridors lies the Vatican Apostolic Archive, once known as the Secret Archive. The name has changed, but the mystery has not. This library does not serve the public. It serves power. Within its walls sit over 50 miles of shelves, stacked with manuscripts, letters, ledgers, and decrees that span more than 1,000 years. Imagine a vault that contains the private letters of kings and emperors, the negotiations of popes with dictators, the reports of spies, the records of trials, and the whispers of scandals long erased from official history. Now imagine that only a handful of people have ever been allowed to see them. That is the Vatican's library. The archive is not fiction. It is real, and scholars who have glimpsed it describe an overwhelming sea of documents. But the rules are strict. You must apply months in advance. You must specify exactly what you want. Though how can you know what to ask for if you cannot see the catalogue? Once inside, you may request only a limited number of files. Copies are forbidden. Photography is forbidden. Notes must be approved. And always, someone is watching. The library contains letters from Michelangelo pleading for payment. It holds Galileo's trial documents, where science bowed to doctrine. It houses correspondence between Hitler and the Vatican, still studied for hints of complicity or resistance. There are reports on the Knights Templar, suppressed for centuries. There are entire collections sealed under embargo, waiting for dates that may never come. What else lies there? Rumors abound. The true gospel accounts excluded from the Bible. Records of early rites now called heresy. Documents proving the church once possessed knowledge of astronomy and medicine far ahead of its time. Some believe the archives hold proof of cover-ups, scandals buried to protect reputation, crimes excused by silence. The Vatican insists these are exaggerations. They say the archive is open to qualified researchers, but open is a word with limits. Imagine a vast ocean, and you are allowed a single cup of water. Yes, you can drink, but you will never taste the depth. The library is locked not by accident, but by design. Knowledge is power, and power thrives when others do not know what you know. The church has outlasted empires because it mastered secrecy. Documents can exonerate, but they can also condemn. A file released at the wrong time can collapse trust, ignite scandal, or weaken authority. Better, then, to wait, to release only when the danger has passed, to keep the rest under lock, behind the polite phrase, for preservation. The locked library is less about paper than about control. It is the difference between what billions of believers imagine and what only a few custodians know. For every document shown, there are countless still hidden. For every truth revealed, there is another kept quiet. The shelves are heavy not with parchment, but with choices, what to tell, what to withhold, and what to let fade in the dark. And so, we return to the keyring. For behind those doors, guarded by silence and time, lies a library not of knowledge alone, but of power. What you are about to hear in this book, rituals, scandals, contradictions, each of them connects back to these shelves. Somewhere in those 50 miles of silence, the answers rest. Whether we will ever be allowed to see them is another question. It begins with a simple question. Who decides what counts as scripture? The Bible we hold today feels fixed, eternal, untouchable. Yet, in truth, it is the result of choices. Choices made by councils, choices shaped by politics, and choices enforced by silence. There were once many gospels, many accounts of the life and words of Jesus, written by disciples, followers, and early communities. Some of them were included, many were not, and the Vatican knows this better than anyone, because it has worked for centuries to control which voices are heard and which remain buried. Imagine a world where you only hear one side of a story. That is what canonization did. At gatherings like the Council of Nicaea and the later councils that followed, church leaders debated which writings would form the backbone of Christian faith. The four Gospels we know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were chosen. Others, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the Gospel of Judas, were cast aside. Why? Not because they were meaningless, but because they were dangerous. They challenged authority. They hinted at interpretations that could have shifted the balance of power in the early church. Take the Gospel of Thomas. It presents Jesus not as a distant savior, but as a teacher revealing hidden wisdom, urging people to find truth within themselves. The kingdom is inside you and outside you, it says. A radical idea, because it removes the need for an institution to stand between you and God. If that message had spread widely, the church's grip on power would have been weakened from the start. Better then to silence it. Or the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. This text portrays Mary not as a footnote, but as a central disciple, even a leader. In its pages, she speaks wisdom that the male disciples doubt and resist. Imagine the shift if women had been recognized as spiritual equals at the very foundation of Christianity. The hierarchy we see today would look nothing like it does. The church knew this. It chose instead to suppress her voice, to cast her as sinner rather than leader, to erase her authority and confine her to a symbol of repentance. The gospel that bore her name was pushed to the shadows, hidden in monasteries, forbidden from the pulpit. And then there is the Gospel of Judas, discovered centuries later in fragments. This text flips the story we know. Judas, the betrayer, is shown as the one disciple who truly understood Jesus, the one who carried out a necessary act. It was not betrayal, but obedience. Imagine what such a narrative does to the foundations of doctrine, where Judas represents treachery, sin, and warning. If Judas was faithful, if his act was planned, then the meaning of sacrifice itself changes. The church had no interest in letting this version breathe. These gospels and others like them were silenced not because they lacked beauty or depth, but because they challenged control. They offered visions of faith that were direct, egalitarian, mystical, or disruptive. They suggested a Christianity not bound tightly to the authority of priests and bishops, but open, fluid, and deeply personal. The Vatican could not allow that. To govern millions, faith had to be unified, codified, and controlled. Divergent voices had to be erased or buried. The proof of this silencing is in the ground itself. Many of these texts survived only because they were hidden in caves or buried in jars, like those found at Nag Hammadi in Egypt. For centuries they sat untouched, preserved by accident or intention, waiting to resurface. When scholars began to study them, they realized just how rich and varied early Christianity truly was, and just how much had been cut away. The Vatican rarely acknowledges these silenced gospels publicly. Official statements dismiss them as Gnostic or heretical, but within its archives lie countless references, debates, and suppressed studies. It knows their power. It knows their challenge. And so, silence remains the easiest answer. The faithful continue to hear only the version of the story that was allowed, never realizing how many other voices once spoke beside it. The silenced gospels matter because they show us what was possible. They remind us that Christianity could have been broader, more inclusive, more mystical. They remind us that history is not fate, but choice. And they remind us that the Vatican's greatest power has always been to decide which truths live and which die. To know that, to see that, is to begin reading the faith not only by what it shows, but by what it hides. And once you see the silence, you cannot unhear it. The Vatican is famous for ritual, incense rising, Latin words whispered, bells ringing through marble halls. But behind the public ceremonies, there are other rituals, darker, stranger, more contested. Some are remnants of ancient practices the church worked hard to bury. Others are rites it still guards closely, permitting only the chosen few to perform them. To speak of these rituals is to step into a twilight space where faith and fear blur. Begin with exorcism. The Vatican officially recognizes it, trains priests in it, and keeps a handbook of prayers and commands for driving out demons. Yet the practice is rarely shown. It is hidden from the public eye, performed only when approval is granted. Why? Because exorcism is volatile. It brings the supernatural into the open, where control is fragile. Too much exposure, and faith risks looking like superstition. Too little, and it risks losing its power. The church walks this line carefully, guarding the ritual as both weapon and secret. But exorcism is only the surface. For centuries, the Vatican has battled what it calls folk religion, practices that mix Christianity with older pagan traditions. In villages across Europe, people once used charms, spells, and blessings passed down long before the cross arrived. Many of these were absorbed, disguised as Christian prayers. Others were condemned as witchcraft. Yet, fragments remain in the Vatican's own history, in manuals written to instruct priests how to deal with such rites, or even how to perform them under strict control. The line between forbidden magic and holy sacrament is thinner than we think. Consider relic veneration. At first glance it seems simple. Bones of saints, fragments of the cross, objects touched by holy hands. Pilgrims kneel, candles burn, prayers rise. But step closer, and you see how the ritual borders on sorcery. The faithful believe relics hold power, not symbolic, but real, tangible power. A bone can heal, a cloth can protect, a drop of blood can save. For centuries, relics were carried into battle as weapons displayed to summon rain or used to heal the sick. The Vatican tried to regulate this, creating lists of approved relics and condemning fakes. Yet the practice itself shows a church tangled with magic, where sacred objects blur with talismans and devotion merges with spell. There are darker whispers still, rituals of secrecy, oaths taken by cardinals, ceremonies held at night to initiate new members into hidden orders. Some of these are documented, some only rumored. The Jesuits, for example, were accused of blood oaths and forbidden practices. Though many charges were slander, the fact remains. The Vatican thrives on ritual that binds loyalty, sometimes in ways the public would never imagine. A handshake, a vow, a symbol, small acts that carry immense weight in the corridors of power. And then there are the stories the Vatican does not confirm, but does not erase. Ancient rites performed before altars in catacombs. Midnight masses that were not for the public, but for the few. Liturgies of secrecy, perhaps echoing older pagan practices, perhaps designed to guard knowledge not meant for open ears. Were these rituals real? Hard evidence is scarce, but absence does not mean emptiness. The fact that such stories persist, whispered across centuries, tells us something. Where there is smoke, there is fire, even if the flames are hidden. The forbidden rituals matter not only for what they were, but for what they reveal. A church constantly negotiating the line between faith and power. Ritual is control. Ritual is identity. By deciding which ceremonies are holy and which are heresy, the Vatican defines itself. yet it cannot erase the traces of what it once fought. Relics, exorcisms, oaths, all carry the echo of forbidden practices surviving in shadows. The church may deny the darkness, but the rituals remain, whispering in the silence of its halls. Walk through St. Peter's Basilica. Look up, look around. The marble gleams, the frescoes burn with color, the sculptures breathe. To most, it is beauty, devotion, triumph. But to some, it is also a code. For centuries, artists have slipped symbols into their work, hidden warnings, secret critiques, truths too dangerous to speak aloud. The Vatican is filled with such codes, etched into its very walls. Michelangelo is the most famous. Commissioned to paint the Sistine Chapel's ceiling, he filled it with biblical scenes. But look closer, and you see more. In the panel of the creation of Adam, the shape surrounding God and the angels is not random. It mirrors the human brain, down to folds and stem. Why? Was Michelangelo suggesting that divinity is linked to human intellect? Was he hinting that God is found not only above, but within? Such an idea challenges the authority of priests who claim to mediate between man and heaven. Whether intentional or not, the code is there, staring from the ceiling above papal ceremonies. In the Last Judgment, Michelangelo painted a figure that looks unmistakably like himself, skinned alive, his face hanging on a flayed body. A message, perhaps, about the torment of serving a church that demanded obedience but stifled freedom. To the public, it is just another saint. To the artist, it was confession in paint. Bernini too played with symbols, his sculptures insane. Peter's square form not just beauty, but geometry. Stand in the center, and the colonnade embraces you like arms. But the pattern also recalls ancient sun symbols, linking Christian triumph to pagan roots. Bernini knew what he was doing. He layered meaning so only the attentive would notice. The Vatican walls are full of such codes, eyes carved into corners, animals tucked into decoration, inscriptions that play double meanings. Some are warnings from artists who distrusted their patrons. Some are whispers of older beliefs, slipped in so they would not be forgotten. The church often claimed total control over art, but artists were human. They resisted, they encoded. Reading these codes requires patience. You cannot rush past marble and fresco. You must linger, search, compare. You must learn the language of symbols, the snake, the key, the hand, the star. Each carries layers. Each may say more than a sermon. Why does this matter? Because the codes show that even in the heart of Vatican power, dissent survived. Truths too dangerous to speak aloud found refuge in art. Michelangelo could not tell the Pope his doubts, but he could paint them. Bernini could not argue doctrine, but he could sculpt it into stone. The Vatican may have tried to silence certain voices, but it could not erase the hands that carved, painted, and built its own halls. And so, the buildings themselves speak, not in words, but in shapes, colors, and shadows. They remind us that no power is absolute. Secrets cannot be buried completely. They surface in brushstrokes, in marble curves, in whispers of geometry. If you know how to read, the Vatican is not only a palace of faith, it is also a book of secrets, written in stone. Money is supposed to be simple. You earn it, you spend it, you save it. But inside the Vatican, money becomes something else. It becomes invisible, layered, disguised. The Vatican Bank, officially called the Institute for Works of Religion, is not a normal bank. It does not advertise. It does not compete for customers. It does not open accounts for just anyone. It exists in the shadows, serving priests, nuns, cardinals, and missions across the world. And behind its gates, money moves in ways most people will never see. The Vatican insists that its finances serve only spiritual purposes. Yet history shows a pattern: scandals, cover-ups, and unexplained wealth. In the 1980s, a major collapse shook the world when Banco Ambrosiano, tied deeply to Vatican money, went bankrupt. Billions disappeared. The chairman was later found hanging under a bridge in London, his pockets filled with bricks. Officially, his death was ruled suicide. Unofficially, whispers of murder never died. The Vatican denied direct involvement, but its fingerprints were everywhere. Letters of credit, secret guarantees, money routed through channels that should never have existed. That was not the first time, and not the last. Again and again, journalists uncovered evidence of Vatican money laundering. Funds from dictators, cash from questionable regimes, even links to organized crime. Why would the church allow this? The answer lies in power. Money buys influence, and influence keeps doors open. A dictator might be brutal, but if his government protects Catholic schools, funds Catholic hospitals, or gives land for Catholic missions, the church looks the other way. The bank becomes the channel. Dirty money enters, clean money exits, and the veil remains closed. The Vatican has no obligation to publish full financial reports. Each year, it releases carefully crafted summaries, vague numbers without detail. Surpluses are celebrated. Deficits are explained away. But the real story, the complete ledgers, remain locked. Even insiders sometimes struggle to follow the trail. Auditors are appointed and dismissed. Independent oversight is promised, then quietly removed. Transparency is announced, then forgotten. The cycle repeats. And yet, the money keeps flowing. Pilgrims drop coins into collection boxes. Churches across the world send donations. Wealthy patrons leave fortunes in their wills. Millions arrive every year. Billions across decades. Where does it all go? Some funds pay for schools, hospitals, charities, and missions. That much is true. But others disappear into investments, real estate deals, and secret accounts. The Vatican owns blocks of property in London, Paris, and Rome, bought quietly and held under obscure names. These are not cathedrals or hospitals. They are luxury apartments and commercial buildings. Rents flow upward, feeding the institution, while parishioners are told the church survives only by sacrifice. To understand the veil, imagine a curtain drawn across a stage. You see the actors, the public gestures, charity drives, missionary collections, grand renovations. But behind the curtain, the stagehands move quietly. Money shifts from one account to another. A property is bought through a holding company. A donation is funneled into a project, then redirected. No one outside sees the full script. And when questions are asked, the Vatican answers with phrases that mean nothing. For pastoral needs, for the good of the church, for the mission of Christ. Words become the curtain itself. The truth is that money has always been one of the church's greatest powers. Armies may fade, empires may fall, but money endures. With money, The Vatican built alliances, survived wars, and influenced politics. With money, it protected itself from collapse. And with money, it kept control over its own narrative. Every coin, every hidden account, every property title becomes a thread in a vast web of influence. But secrecy has a cost. Scandal after scandal has forced the Vatican to issue promises of reform. Committees are formed, rules are drafted, yet the veil remains. Even recent years have brought new revelations of millions lost through corruption, of officials enriching themselves, of funds intended for charity ending up in luxury real estate. The cycle does not break, it only adapts. The faithful are told their donations serve God. Many of them do, but many also vanish into shadows. The Vatican's money veil hides not only numbers, but choices. Choices that determine which missions survive, which voices are silenced, which leaders are supported, and which questions remain unanswered. To understand this veil is to understand one of the darkest secrets of all, that behind holy words and sacred rituals, the Church has mastered the art of invisible finance, where morality bends to power and transparency is only a word. When you hear the word saint, you imagine purity, perfection, a life untouched by fault. Saints are painted in glowing colors, their faces serene, their deeds heroic. They are examples to follow, models of virtue. But the truth is more complicated. Behind many saints lie stories that were edited, polished, and sometimes rewritten. Saints, too, had scars. And the Vatican worked hard to hide them. Canonization, the process of declaring someone a saint, is one of the most powerful tools the Church holds. To be called a saint means more than holiness. It means authority. It means influence. It means that your life story becomes a sermon, repeated in churches, studied by believers, used as proof of God's power. But who decides? And what gets left out? The Vatican decides, and it leaves out plenty. Start with the process itself. Every candidate for sainthood undergoes investigation. Their writings are studied. Their actions are reviewed. Miracles are required, usually healings verified by medical boards. But this investigation is not neutral. It is guided by politics. Some candidates move quickly, pushed by powerful supporters. Others wait centuries. Some are ignored altogether. The choice is never purely spiritual. It is strategic. Take Joan of Arc. Burned as a heretic in 1431, centuries later, declared a saint. What changed? Not her story, not her visions. What changed was politics. In the 15th century, her defiance of church authority was intolerable. In the 20th, her patriotism served as a rallying point for Catholics in France. Her sainthood was not about her purity, it was about her usefulness. Or consider more recent figures. Pope John Paul II was canonized at record speed, less than a decade after his death. Supporters praised his role in opposing communism, but critics pointed out that his record on abuse scandals was deeply flawed, his silence damaging. Yet the Vatican moved quickly, shaping his memory before questions could dominate. His sainthood became a shield, transforming criticism into reverence. The scars of his legacy were painted over in gold. Other saints were not so lucky. Some had writings that questioned doctrine, challenging official teachings. Those writings were buried, edited, or destroyed. Their lives were retold with clean lines, doubts erased. Mystics who spoke of visions that contradicted church authority were silenced or recast as obedient servants. Even figures like Saint Augustine had their rough edges smoothed. His confessions of lust and doubt were reframed as evidence of conversion, not signs of human struggle. The narrative had to inspire, not unsettle. Why does this matter? Because sainthood is power. Saints shape faith more than theologians or councils. Their stories reach children, villagers, the ordinary faithful. If those stories were told in full, if saints were shown as complicated, flawed, struggling, the faithful might see themselves reflected. But the Vatican prefers control. It prefers perfect icons, untouchable heroes. Scars are hidden, contradictions are erased, and the faithful are left with tales too clean to be real. The cost of this editing is trust. When truth finally surfaces, when we learn that a saint had doubts, that a miracle was questionable, that a legacy was mixed, the faithful feel betrayed. They realize the story was never pure. It was crafted, and crafted stories serve the institution more than the people. Saints with scars remind us of something deeper. Holiness does not mean perfection. It means humanity, struggle, and growth. But the Vatican's system does not allow such complexity. It builds marble statues, not flesh and blood. It silences the scars when the scars themselves might hold the truest lessons of all. Power rarely shouts. In the Vatican, it whispers. Decisions that shape billions are not always made in public councils or papal decrees. They are shaped in hallways, in private dinners, in exchanges of letters never published. This is the Whisper Network, the invisible web of influence, gossip, and secret deals that runs beneath the marble floors of the Holy See. The Vatican is small, just over 100 acres, but within those walls lives a world of factions. Cardinals align with each other, form groups, build loyalties. Some push for reform, others fight for tradition. Some guard finances, others guard doctrine. And all of them know that what is said quietly in confidence can matter more than what is announced in public. Imagine a young priest rising through the ranks. His path depends not only on prayer and study, but on who supports him. A whispered recommendation from a cardinal can open doors. A whispered doubt can close them forever. Careers are built or destroyed, not by open trials, but by invisible murmurs. This is not conspiracy. It is the way institutions survive, through networks of trust, suspicion, and quiet signals. The Whisper Network also protects. When scandals surface, files move quickly. A priest accused may be quietly reassigned. A dossier may be edited. A statement may be delayed until attention shifts. None of this is announced. It is arranged through conversations in closed rooms, decisions that never reach paper. Silence is coordinated. Blame is managed. Responsibility is scattered. The faithful outside never hear the whispers. They hear only the polished announcement. For pastoral reasons, with deep concern, in prayerful reflection. But the whispers are not only for defense, they are also for offense. Factions use leaks to wound rivals. A damaging story appears in a newspaper, sourced anonymously. A speech hints at disagreement, timed to embarrass. A file suddenly becomes available to a journalist, not by accident but by design. The Vatican's Whisper Network is a weapon, wielded with precision. Allies are rewarded, enemies are weakened, and the public never sees the hands behind the curtain. Some call this politics, some call it survival. Either way, it is one of the darkest secrets, that behind the public face of unity, the Vatican runs on division. Not every cardinal agrees, not every pope is supported. The whispers shape outcomes as much as ballots. Even conclaves, where popes are chosen, are preceded by years of quiet deals, promises, and warnings. By the time the smoke rises, much has already been decided. The whisper network thrives because it cannot be proven. It leaves no record, no confession, no decree. But it is real. Priests speak of it. Journalists chase it. Insiders know it, and its effect is undeniable. Decisions that affect the faithful are often made not in prayerful silence before God, but in whispered conversations behind closed doors. The faithful believe they hear the whole truth from pulpits and statements, but the truth is layered. For every public word, there are 10 whispered. For every policy, a dozen quiet negotiations. For every scandal addressed, 100 hidden. To see this is to realize that the Vatican is not only a place of prayer, it is also a place of whispers. And whispers, when gathered, can move mountains. The world imagines justice as open, public, clear. Courts stand in daylight, records are kept, and sentences are announced. But inside the Vatican, justice often hides. Trials happen behind closed doors, files are sealed, names are blurred. The faithful are told only what the Church chooses to reveal. This is not accident, it is design. The Vatican's legal system is one of its most guarded secrets, and it shows how power is protected not by truth, but by silence. The Vatican is its own state. That means it has its own courts, judges, and prisons. But unlike nations, these courts do not run on transparency. Cases involving priests, bishops, and even cardinals are often handled internally. The reasoning is simple. The Church claims authority over its own. Yet the result is troubling. Crimes that would bring public trials elsewhere, abuse, corruption, misconduct, are dealt with in shadows. Victims rarely see justice. Records rarely see light. Consider how cases of abuse have been handled for decades. Accusations made against priests were often reviewed in secret tribunals. Victims were told to remain silent. Priests were reassigned rather than punished. The files documenting these cases are locked in diocesan archives or in Rome, labeled for internal use. When governments demanded cooperation, the Vatican claimed immunity as a sovereign state. Trials that might have exposed names and patterns instead ended in whispers, sealed judgments, and instructions never meant for public eyes. Even financial crimes follow this path. When officials of the Vatican Bank were caught in scandals, some were tried internally. Proceedings were quiet, carefully managed. Few documents leaked. Sometimes officials were dismissed or relocated, their reputations slightly bruised but not destroyed. Meanwhile, the institution protected itself. The faithful outside heard only phrases like, disciplinary measures were taken. What those measures were, how decisions were reached, those details stayed behind locked doors. Why such secrecy? The Vatican justifies it as protection of faith. Scandals, it claims, must be contained so they do not harm the Church's mission. Trials must be discreet to prevent confusion or scandal among the faithful. But in practice, this discretion becomes denial. The truth is hidden not to protect belief, but to protect power. Justice becomes a tool not of fairness, but of control. A guilty man may walk free if his punishment would damage the church's reputation. An innocent man may be silenced if his testimony threatens authority. This hidden justice system is older than modern courts. For centuries, the church ran its own inquisitions, questioning and punishing those accused of heresy. Those trials were not about truth, but about conformity. Confessions were forced. Testimonies were shaped. Outcomes were predetermined. Though methods have changed, the principle remains. Trials inside the Vatican are less about law than about control of narrative. They decide not only guilt or innocence, but which stories the world is allowed to hear. Even when the Vatican does announce trials, they are selective. A case may be chosen as a show of reform, carefully staged to demonstrate transparency. Journalists are invited. Statements are read. But these trials are exceptions, not the rule. They are meant to prove the system works, while most cases remain hidden. It is a controlled performance, designed to reassure without truly opening the doors. The greatest proof of secrecy is the absence of records. Ask how many priests have faced Vatican trials, and you will not find a full list. Ask how many were punished, and you will find vague numbers, conflicting reports, or silence. The files exist, but they remain sealed. Even victims who testify often never learn the outcome. Justice, in this system, is not for them. It is for the institution. The faithful believe the church speaks for truth, but the truth of these trials shows something else. That the Vatican speaks for itself first. The law bends to power. Records bend to reputation. And justice bends to silence. Behind closed doors, stories end not with verdicts, but with shadows. What the world never hears is as important as what it is told. And in those silences, the darkest secrets live. Relics are everywhere in Catholic tradition. A vial of blood, a piece of cloth, a fragment of bone. They are said to carry power, to connect the faithful with the saints, to work miracles. Churches across the world display them in golden reliquaries, kissed and prayed before by millions. But not every relic has been found. Not every relic is authentic, and some, the most important of all, are missing. These lost bones are one of the Vatican's most carefully hidden problems. Start with Saint Peter himself. The Vatican stands on the site said to be Peter's burial place. Beneath the Grand Dome lies the necropolis, the ancient Roman cemetery. Excavations in the 20th century uncovered bones claimed to be Peter's. The announcement was triumphant. The church's foundation truly sat upon the bones of its first pope. But questions remain. Not all scholars agree the bones belong to Peter. Some evidence was contradictory. Some tests inconclusive. The Vatican presented certainty where certainty did not exist. Why? Because doubt about Peter's tomb would mean doubt about the very authority of Rome. Better to declare and silence the questions. Then there are the relics of Jesus himself, pieces of the true cross, nails from the crucifixion, the crown of thorns, fragments of the manger. The faithful believe, but historians doubt. There are too many fragments, too many claims. If gathered, some say, the true cross would be large enough to build a ship. The Vatican has never offered full accounting. It displays some relics, hides others, and avoids direct answers about authenticity. The power lies not in proof, but in belief. Still, the missing pieces, the bones, the body, haunt the story. If they exist, where are they? If they do not, why claim they do? Other saints, too, have lost bones, relics stolen, sold, traded, or hidden. In the Middle Ages, churches competed for relics, sometimes stealing from one another to attract pilgrims. The Vatican worked to regulate this trade, but could not stop it. Today, many relics are untraceable. Some lie in private collections. Others may be in Vatican vaults, locked away because their authenticity cannot be defended. The faithful are told only of the relics displayed, not of the relics lost. There are darker whispers as well. Rumors of bodies hidden to suppress scandal. Bones of figures whose stories contradict official doctrine. Graves that, if opened, would reveal truths the Church prefers buried. The Vatican denies such claims, but its silence feeds suspicion. After all, if relics can inspire millions, their absence can also undermine faith. Better to say nothing, to keep doors closed, to let mystery replace certainty. Why do the lost bones matter? Because they show how belief and power intertwine. Relics are not just sacred objects, they are instruments of authority. A church with a relic draws pilgrims. A Vatican with Peter's bones claims supremacy. When relics are missing, stolen, or doubted, that authority shakes. And so, the Vatican hides the doubts, guards the fragments, and controls the narrative. Faith thrives on symbols. The Vatican knows this. It does not need every relic to be authentic. It only needs them to be believed. The faithful kiss glass cases, whisper prayers, and feel connection. The question of authenticity remains locked away, and the bones, whether real, fake, or lost, remain in shadow. The lost bones remind us of a larger truth, that history is fragile, and that power often depends not on what is proven, but on what is claimed. The Vatican's silence about missing relics is not empty. It is strategic. It preserves belief, even at the cost of truth. And once again, silence becomes the most powerful relic of all. Knowledge is not always welcomed. Inside the Vatican, scholarship itself can be dangerous. The Church has long controlled who may publish, who may teach, and who may speak. Those who cross certain lines find themselves silenced, exiled, or erased. This is the scholar's blacklist, and it is one of the oldest and darkest tools of Vatican power. Centuries ago, the blacklist was open. It was called the Index of Forbidden Books. From the 16th century until the 20th, the Church published lists of works Catholics were forbidden to read. The reason was simple. Dangerous ideas spread quickly, and books were powerful. Works by Galileo, Copernicus, Descartes, and countless others were placed on the index. The Church claimed to protect faith, but in truth, it feared losing control. Knowledge that contradicted doctrine was seen not as challenge, but as threat. The index was abolished in 1966. Officially, Catholics are now free to read any book, but the spirit of censorship did not vanish. It changed form. Today, scholars still find themselves silenced when their work crosses invisible lines. The Vatican may not publish blacklists anymore, but it still controls who receives teaching licenses, who can publish in approved journals, who can hold positions in Catholic universities. Step too far, and you may lose your platform. Consider theologians who questioned papal authority. Some argued for women priests. Others defended LGBTQ rights. Still others critiqued church teaching on birth control. Many of them lost their licenses to teach. Some were forbidden from publishing under Catholic labels. Others were quietly removed from positions. The punishment was not public trial, but professional death. Their names faded, their voices silenced. The faithful outside rarely knew why. Even scientists face pressure. Research that touches on bioethics, evolution, or medicine is scrutinized. Those who cross doctrinal lines risk losing Vatican approval. Their work may not be banned outright, but it may be discredited, ignored, or buried under bureaucracy. The blacklist survives not as paper, but as practice. It operates through silence, through denial of recognition, through the quiet erasure of dissent. Why does the Vatican fear scholars? Because knowledge threatens monopoly. If ordinary people can read, study, and think freely, they may question authority. They may ask why certain gospels were excluded, why rituals are hidden, why power is hoarded. They may find answers that do not align with doctrine. To prevent this, the Church manages information. It does not burn books anymore. It simply makes them invisible. The cost of this blacklist is vast. Generations of thinkers silenced. Voices that could have enriched faith, muted. Questions that might have led to growth, smothered. Instead, the Church presents a curated version of knowledge, safe for belief, safe for power. The faithful are told they have access to truth, but truth has been filtered, shaped, edited. What they receive is not the full picture, but the permitted picture. The scholar's blacklist is not only about the past, it continues today. Theologians know which questions are safe and which are dangerous. Students learn quickly where the lines lie. Self-censorship becomes survival. And the Vatican maintains control not through open bans, but through fear of exclusion. The silence is deeper than any index. It is lived in the minds of scholars who know that one wrong word can end a career. This is the true danger of the blacklist. It creates not only silence, but obedience. It turns knowledge into a controlled resource, guarded like treasure, and it leaves the faithful in the dark, never realizing how much light has been hidden. Step into any church, and you will see women everywhere. They sing in choirs, teach children, clean altars, run charities, and hold communities together. Their presence is constant, their labor unending. But in the Vatican itself, in the halls of decision-making, women remain at the threshold. They knock, they serve, they pray, yet the door to power stays shut. This silence about women's authority is one of the darkest, least spoken secrets of the Vatican. The roots of this exclusion go back to the earliest days of Christianity. Evidence from the first centuries shows women served as deaconesses. Inscriptions from ancient tombs name women as leaders in local communities. Some texts even describe female disciples who taught, baptized, and presided over gatherings. But as the Church centralized power, women were pushed aside. By the time doctrine hardened in the Middle Ages, women were confined to convents, their voices heard only in cloistered walls. Their presence in leadership vanished, erased not by lack of calling, but by deliberate choice. The Vatican has long defended this exclusion with theology. It argues that because Jesus chose male apostles, priesthood is reserved for men. It insists that women's role is different but equal. rooted in service rather than authority. Yet this explanation ignores history. It ignores the silence gospels that name Mary Magdalene as a leader. It ignores evidence of women serving as deacons. It ignores the plain truth that exclusion is not divine law, but human decision. Behind closed doors, this issue is more dangerous than most realize. Many bishops privately admit the church would collapse without women. They run schools, hospitals, parishes, and charities. They sustain faith at the ground level, and yet these same women cannot preach at Mass. They cannot consecrate bread and wine. They cannot vote in papal elections. Their work builds the house, but their names remain off the deeds. The Vatican fears what change would bring. To ordain women would challenge centuries of tradition. It would open questions about authority, succession, and legitimacy. If women once served as deacons, why not now? If Mary Magdalene was teacher, why not allow women today to preach? These questions shake the very structure of Vatican power, built on hierarchy and exclusion. And so the answer remains silence. The threshold stays locked. But silence does not erase reality. Women continue to push. Theologians argue, movements form, nuns write letters, scholars present research, activists hold vigils outside basilicas. Each effort is met with polite refusal or outright punishment. Yet the questions remain. They cannot be buried forever. The darkest secret here is not simply exclusion. It is the knowledge within the Vatican that exclusion is unsustainable. Leaders know the faithful are leaving. They know communities crave equality. They know history shows women once led. And still, they deny. The threshold remains guarded, not because women lack calling, but because the Vatican fears what will happen if the door finally opens. From the outside, the Pope looks untouchable. He is called infallible in matters of doctrine. His word is final, his authority absolute. But inside the Vatican, the truth is different. Popes are not kings. They are not emperors. They are men surrounded by factions, advisors, and rivals. And sometimes, a pope is more prisoner than ruler. This hidden struggle, this papal divide, is one of the Church's most carefully managed secrets. Consider the conclave, the election of a pope. The faithful see white smoke and hear the announcement, Habemus Papam. But what they do not see are the months, even years, of maneuvering beforehand. Cardinals campaign quietly, building alliances, promising favors. Factions form, conservatives against progressives, reformers against defenders of tradition. By the time the cardinals enter the Sistine Chapel, many votes are already decided. The new pope may wear white, but the strings of power remain tangled around him. Once elected, a pope faces constant pressure. Advisors control information. Documents cross his desk filtered by secretaries. Not every letter reaches him. Not every fact is shared. In theory, the pope is supreme. In practice, he depends on those around him. If they support him, his reforms move forward. If they resist, his initiatives stall. Many popes have discovered this too late. They speak, but nothing changes. Their authority is honored in public, but undermined in private. History offers examples. Pope John XXIII shocked the Vatican by calling the Second Vatican Council, opening windows for reform. But even then, factions worked to control outcomes. His successors faced backlash, efforts to reverse what had been decided. Pope Paul VI was so pressured that he hesitated. His reforms half-finished, his decisions conflicted. Pope Benedict XVI resigned, citing age and weakness. But many insiders whispered that he had been cornered, that factions within the Curia had tied his hands. His papacy ended not with triumph, but with retreat. Even Francis, praised for bold words, faces constant resistance. His calls for reform are filtered through layers of bureaucracy. His opponents leak documents, stir dissent, and wait for him to falter. He may be pope, but he is not free. The papal throne is surrounded not only by prayers, but by daggers. The papal divide matters because it shatters the illusion of absolute authority. The faithful are told the Pope leads the Church with divine certainty, but behind walls, he negotiates, compromises, and sometimes surrenders. His office is not infallibility in action, it is survival in politics. And the Vatican works hard to hide this truth, because to admit it would weaken the image of unity. The darkest secret here is that popes are less powerful than the world believes. They are figures trapped between factions, symbols held hostage by politics. Their decisions are not always their own, and the faithful who look to Rome for clarity may never know how divided their shepherd truly is. The Vatican is not just a church, it is a state. And like every state, it makes deals. Some are public, signed with ceremony. Others are secret, negotiated in shadows. These quiet treaties have shaped history, guided wars, and hidden scandals. They reveal the Vatican not as neutral, but as deeply political. And they show how silence can be bought, traded, and signed into law. Start with concordats, agreements between the Vatican and nations. These treaties give the Church privileges, control over schools, exemption from taxes, recognition of marriage law. In return, governments receive support, legitimacy, or silence. Concordats with dictators are the most infamous. In the 1930s, the Vatican signed a treaty with Mussolini, securing control of Vatican City in exchange for support of his regime. Around the same time, a concordat with Hitler's Germany promised protection of Catholic rights. In return, the Church agreed to stay out of politics. Publicly, it preached neutrality. Privately, it gave dictators space to rise. Such deals continued in other eras. Agreements with Latin American regimes ensured Catholic schools flourished while human rights abuses went unchallenged. Concordats with communist governments allowed limited worship in exchange for silence about repression. Each deal was framed as protection of the faithful, but each also served power, granting the Vatican influence while governments gained legitimacy. Not all treaties were written. Some were verbal, understood by both sides. A government promised donations. The Vatican promised discretion. A ruler gave land. The Church gave blessing. These quiet exchanges often left no record, but their effects were real. They shaped elections, guided wars, and silenced protests. The faithful rarely knew. They believed their church stood apart from politics, above the corruption of states. But behind closed doors, the Vatican acted like any government, bargaining for influence, trading silence for survival. The darkest part was not simply the deals themselves, but the way they were hidden. The faithful were told neutrality was holy. In truth, it was often purchased. The quiet treaties matter because they show the Vatican's double face. Publicly, it speaks of eternal truth. Privately, it signs agreements like any worldly power. It preaches morality while shaking hands with dictators. It condemns injustice while negotiating with those who commit it. And it hides these contradictions behind walls of silence, archives of locked files, and the language of diplomacy. The Vatican survives because of these treaties. It has outlasted empires, regimes, and revolutions, not by staying pure, but by staying strategic. Yet each deal carries a cost. Every treaty signed in silence leaves scars on faith. Scars that surface when history reveals what was once denied. The faithful are left to wonder, how much truth has been traded away, and at what price? For centuries, the Vatican has spoken with certainty about heaven and hell, angels and demons. It teaches the faithful to pray against temptation, to resist evil, to trust the Church as guardian against the devil's tricks. But behind the official sermons lies a more complicated truth. The Vatican has not only acknowledged the devil's presence, it has recorded him, studied him, and at times feared him more than it admits. These hidden stories form the devil's footnotes, a collection of cases and confessions that the Church keeps out of sight. Exorcism is the most visible example. The ritual exists, codified in a handbook written in Latin, guarded for centuries. Only priests with special training may use it, and only under permission. The public is told these rites are rare, extreme cases of possession, but in the Vatican's files, there are far more accounts than anyone realizes. Quiet reports from parishes across the world describe priests calling for help, bishops authorizing investigations, cases where people spoke in unknown languages or convulsed with unnatural strength. Some are psychological, others remain unexplained. Each one is filed, annotated, marked as confidential. The faithful hear nothing of them. These footnotes show the Church struggling with something it cannot fully control. On one hand, it insists on rationality, teaching that demons cannot possess without consent, that science must be respected. On the other, it trains exorcists, funds their work, and collects their reports. The contradiction is never spoken aloud. Publicly, the Vatican wants to appear calm, modern, unafraid. Privately, it prepares for battles in the shadows. There are darker rumors still. Some exorcisms have failed. Some have left people harmed, broken, or even dead. These cases are rarely acknowledged. When they surface in the media, the Vatican responds cautiously, reminding the world that exorcism is exceptional, that priests must act responsibly. But the files inside tell another story. Experiments with prayers, debates about when to intervene, and disagreements among cardinals about whether the devil is literal or symbolic. The faithful are shielded from these arguments. They are told only that the Church stands firm. Art and architecture also carry the devil's footnotes. In hidden corners of basilicas, demons are carved into stone, not as decoration, but as warning. Paintings depict the devil whispering into ears of bishops, popes, even kings. These images reveal something the Church rarely admits, that temptation does not only touch ordinary believers, it reaches the highest levels of power. The Vatican knows this. It fears it, and yet it cannot speak it openly. To say so would undermine trust. Better to let the message remain in footnotes, in art, in coded warnings. Why are these stories hidden? because they show vulnerability. They reveal a church that does not command demons, but negotiates with mystery. They show priests unsure, bishops divided, and scholars confused. They show that the Vatican, for all its claims of authority, does not fully understand the darkness it preaches against. In a world that expects certainty, uncertainty is dangerous. So the devil remains footnoted, acknowledged but not explained, documented but not admitted. The devil's footnotes matter because they change how we see power. They show that even the Vatican, fortress of doctrine, is haunted by doubts it cannot erase. They show that evil is not only outside the walls, but within them, seeping into corridors, whispering in decisions, bending even sacred rituals into fear. And they remind us that what is not said is often louder than what is preached. For every homily about light, there is a file about darkness. For every sermon about God's triumph, there is a sealed record of a battle the church did not win. These are the devil's footnotes, hidden in margins, waiting to be read. Walk through the Vatican on an ordinary day, and you will see bishops in purple, cardinals in red, nuns in black, priests in white. Their roles seem clear, their hierarchy public. But behind this visible structure, there are other groups, other vows, other allegiances. These are the hidden orders, networks of loyalty and secrecy that shape decisions without ever appearing in official charts. Some are ancient. The Jesuits, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, well-known names today, once operated in secrecy, accused of having rituals and oaths beyond public teaching. The Jesuits, in particular, have long been shadowed by suspicion. Their obedience to the Pope is absolute, their discipline unmatched. This has made them both admired and feared. Rumors of blood oaths, of hidden missions, of covert influence have followed them for centuries. The Vatican dismisses these as slander, yet the power of these groups is undeniable. Jesuits, for example, educated rulers, advised kings, and influenced politics across continents. Their presence shaped history quietly, without public acknowledgement. Other groups are less known: lay associations, private societies, and clerical networks form webs of loyalty that bypass official channels. A bishop may owe allegiance not only to Rome, but to a group of peers who meet in private. A priest may answer more quickly to a fraternity than to his own superior. These hidden orders are rarely acknowledged, but their influence is felt in votes, promotions, and policies. They operate through whispers, recommendations, and quiet favors. The Vatican benefits from this secrecy. Hidden orders provide loyalty, discipline, and control. But they also create risks. When factions become too strong, they rival the Pope himself. History shows moments when hidden orders nearly overtook the Church. The Knights Templar, once defenders of the faith, grew so powerful they threatened kings and popes alike. They were suppressed, their leaders executed, their wealth seized. But their story reveals the danger of secret networks. They can grow beyond control. Even today, the Vatican wrestles with these tensions. Orders and societies exist within its walls, their members bound by vows the public never hears. Some are devoted to spiritual practice. Others are tied to politics or finances. Together, they weave a hidden map of power. A decision announced by the Vatican may seem to come from the Pope, In truth, it may reflect the pressure of a network, the loyalty of an order, the influence of a group that never appears in official documents. Why hide these orders? Because secrecy protects them. It allows influence without accountability. It allows discipline without scrutiny. It allows the Vatican to shape outcomes while denying responsibility. If questioned, it can say, these groups are independent. If accused, it can disown them. Yet the influence remains. The hidden orders matter because they reveal how power really moves in the Vatican, not only through popes and councils, but through networks invisible to the faithful. They show that allegiance is layered, authority divided, and decisions shaped by forces unseen. The faithful believe they follow a single hierarchy. In truth, they follow a web of loyalties, many of which they will never know. That is the secret of the hidden orders. Miracles are central to sainthood. Without them, most candidates cannot be canonized. The Vatican requires proof, healings unexplained by medicine, recoveries that defy science. Committees of doctors and theologians examine each case. Only when all doubt is silenced does the Church declare a miracle. But this is the public story. The hidden story is darker. Many miracles are investigated but never announced. Many are debated, doubted, or denied. These cases are redacted, removed from the record, hidden from the faithful. Why? Because miracles are power. They inspire belief. They move pilgrims. They generate donations. A saint with miracles draws crowds. A saint without them may be forgotten. The Vatican knows this. It highlights miracles that serve its purpose and hides those that do not. Consider the process. When a healing is reported, investigators gather evidence. Doctors are consulted. Witnesses testify. If the case seems strong, it moves forward. If not, it is quietly closed. But the faithful rarely hear of these failures. They are redacted, erased from official accounts. To reveal them would raise questions. Why did the saint not heal? Why was the prayer unanswered? Better to keep silence, to protect the image of certainty. Some miracles are politically inconvenient. A healing in a region where the Vatican struggles may be ignored, lest it empower movements outside Rome's control. A miracle linked to a figure the Church does not wish to promote may be dismissed. Even strong evidence can vanish if it conflicts with politics. Files are sealed, records vanish. The faithful never know. There are also cases where miracles were accepted despite weak evidence. Pressure from powerful groups, desire to canonize quickly, or need for a new patron saint has led to rushed approvals. In such cases, doubts are ignored, doctors silenced, or reports edited. The faithful see only the polished story. The footnotes, the debates, the contradictions are redacted. This hidden system matters because it reveals the fragility of belief. Miracles are presented as divine proof, yet they are filtered by human politics. They are selected, edited, and sometimes invented. The faithful are told of certainty. But behind the scenes, there is only probability, conflict, and compromise. The redacted miracles remind us that faith is not always pure. It is managed, it is curated, and in the Vatican's hands, it becomes less about truth than about narrative. What is shown inspires. What is hidden preserves control. And once again, silence becomes the greatest miracle of all. The Vatican does not only guard history, it also guards the future, or at least what people believe about it. Throughout the centuries, visions and prophecies have surfaced. Dreams of saints, apparitions of the Virgin Mary, warnings of disasters. Some of these the Church has embraced, others it has silenced. This silence, this censorship of prophecy, is one of the least understood secrets. The most famous example is Fatima. In 1917, 3 children in Portugal claimed to see the Virgin Mary, who gave them 3 secrets. The first 2 were revealed quickly: a vision of hell and a prediction of war. The third was kept hidden by the Vatican for decades. The faithful speculated wildly. Some believed it predicted the end of the world. Others thought it warned of corruption within the Church itself. Only in the year 2000 did the Vatican release its version of the third secret, claiming it referred to an assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. But many remain unconvinced. Scholars point to contradictions in the children's original testimonies. Some believe the Vatican altered or withheld parts of the prophecy that spoke of division, betrayal, or downfall from within. This pattern repeats elsewhere. At La Salette in 1846, 2 children reported visions of Mary warning of corruption among priests and bishops. Some versions of their account were published, but others were suppressed. Passages that spoke too directly of Vatican scandals were removed, declared unreliable, or locked away. In Medjugorje, visions began in 1981 and continue to this day. Millions of pilgrims have visited the site, yet the Vatican has hesitated, cautious not because the visions lack followers, but because they may be uncontrollable. If the Virgin speaks freely through visionaries, then the hierarchy loses monopoly over her voice. Better to delay, to investigate endlessly, to never give a final answer. Why censor prophecies? Because prophecy is dangerous. It bypasses authority. It suggests God can speak directly to the people without priests as intermediaries. It can inspire reform, rebellion, or panic. It can undermine doctrine. For the Vatican, prophecy must be managed carefully. Approved visions are framed as affirmations of church teaching. Censored visions are silenced, rewritten, or doubted. The faithful rarely learn the difference. The darkest secret is that even approved prophecies are shaped. Writings of visionaries are edited before publication. Words are rephrased, passages omitted. The Vatican presents polished versions, stripped of details that might cause unrest. The faithful believe they read the full message. In truth, they read what the Vatican allows. The censored prophecies remind us of a simple truth. The Vatican does not fear the future. It fears losing control of the story. And so, visions are not only about heaven's voice, they are about power. To hear them unfiltered would be to glimpse truths the Vatican prefers to keep in shadow. Beneath the Vatican lies a world most will never see. Corridors of shelves, locked rooms, hidden collections. Officially, it is the Apostolic Archive, a library of priceless history. Unofficially, it is something more, a midnight archive of secrets too sensitive to show. Within these walls, knowledge is not only preserved, it is withheld. The archives stretch for miles. Letters from kings, reports from spies, records of trials, accounts of wars, contracts, treaties, confessions, accusations. Each page tells a story, and together they form the most complete record of Western history in existence. Yet most of it is sealed. Scholars may request documents, but only with permission. Many requests are denied. Some collections remain entirely off limits. Why? Because these archives do not only record history, they reveal the Vatican's hand in it. Consider the Inquisition. For centuries, millions lived in fear of its trials. Records of those interrogations still exist. Names of the accused, confessions forced under torture, punishments delivered. Many of these files remain closed. If opened, they would expose not only the cruelty of the system, but also the wealth and land the church gained by confiscating property from the condemned. To reveal everything would mean admitting corruption woven deep into history. Or the records of World War II. The Vatican negotiated with Nazis and fascists. Letters, reports, and telegrams survive. Some have been released, but others remain sealed. Historians demand answers. What did the Vatican know about the Holocaust, and when? What choices did it make? What silences did it keep? The archives hold the truth. The Vatican releases only fragments. The rest remain in shadow, under the excuse of preservation or unfinished cataloguing. The Midnight Archives also hold texts never shown to the world. Early drafts of Gospels, writings deemed heretical, rituals abandoned centuries ago. Some scholars whisper of lost books of the Bible hidden within these shelves, accounts of Jesus and his disciples that would rewrite doctrine if revealed. The Vatican neither confirms nor denies. It lets silence protect the story. Access itself is a ritual. Scholars must apply years in advance, stating exactly what they wish to see. But how can one request what one does not know exists? The catalogue itself is incomplete. Whole collections are described only vaguely, as various letters or miscellaneous reports. Once inside, scholars are watched. No cameras, no copies, no wandering. They may read, but only under supervision. They may take notes, but only in pencil. Every detail of control ensures that knowledge never escapes too far. Why guard these archives so tightly? Because history is power. To reveal everything would expose hypocrisy, corruption, and contradiction. It would strip away the image of holiness. The Midnight Archives are not simply a library. They are a vault of control. By deciding what to release and what to withhold, the Vatican decides what the world believes about the past. The faithful imagine their church as open, transparent, guided by truth. But the Midnight Archives tell another story. A church that survives by silence, guarding pages that could change everything if read aloud. And so, the doors remain closed. The secrets remain midnight, and history waits, untouched, in the dark. Secrecy is never perfect. Sometimes locks fail, files leak, or stories escape. These broken seals are moments when the Vatican's hidden truths spill into the open. They are rare, but when they occur, they reveal just how much is usually concealed. One famous broken seal came with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Discovered in 1947, these ancient manuscripts offered new insights into Jewish life at the time of Jesus. For decades, access to the scrolls was tightly controlled, many scholars excluded. The Vatican was accused of delaying their release, fearing that the texts might challenge Christian doctrine. When the scrolls finally became public in the 1990s, they showed variety and debate within early faith traditions, undermining the idea of one clear, unified origin. The delay itself revealed the Vatican's fear of alternative stories. Another broken seal came with leaked documents in the 2010s. Known as VatiLeaks, these papers exposed corruption, financial mismanagement, and power struggles at the highest levels. Letters from cardinals, secret reports, private memos. They showed a Vatican divided, plagued by scandal, very different from the image of serene holiness projected outward. The leaks shook the papacy, led to resignations, and even contributed to Pope Benedict XVI stepping down. For once, the faithful saw behind the curtain. There have been other leaks, hidden files on abuse, secret correspondence with dictators, suppressed studies on social issues. Each time, the Vatican responded the same way: deny, minimize, promise reform, then return to silence. The broken seals are treated as accidents, not revelations. The faithful are urged to forget, but the damage is lasting. Once people glimpse what lies behind the walls, they cannot unsee it. The broken seals matter because they prove the archives exist. They prove that silence is deliberate. They prove that what is hidden is not imaginary, but real, concrete, dangerous to power. And they raise the most important question: how much more remains sealed? If leaks and discoveries reveal only fragments, what lies in the millions of pages still locked? The Vatican fears broken seals because they erode trust. Every revelation confirms what critics have long suspected, that the Church hides more than it shows. Every document released by accident makes the faithful wonder what else is missing. Every scandal admitted too late makes them question how much was known all along. Yet the seals cannot hold forever. History leaks, secrets slip, truth waits. The Vatican can guard doors, control access, and deny rumors. But paper decays, whispers spread, and sooner or later, locks fail. And when they do, the world sees the truth for what it is. Not absence, but silence. Not myth, but shadow. Not holiness, but humanity, flawed and fearful. The broken seals remind us that power cannot bury truth forever. What is hidden will surface, even if only in fragments. And those fragments are enough to show us what the Vatican most fears: that silence is its greatest secret, and secrecy its greatest weakness. The Vatican presents itself as neutral, above politics, concerned only with the soul. But history shows a different truth. For centuries, it has been entangled in wars, not only as a victim or bystander, but as a participant. Some of these wars were waged openly, with banners and armies. Others were silent wars, fought through money, influence, and covert support. The faithful rarely hear of them, yet they have shaped nations as much as battles fought in daylight. The Papal States once held land across Italy, guarded by armies under papal command. These forces fought wars, raised taxes, and defended territories. Popes did not only bless soldiers, they commanded them. Documents in archives describe campaigns ordered by pontiffs, strategies discussed, and alliances made with kings. The Vatican was not just a spiritual leader, it was a feudal power, armed and willing to fight. Even after losing its territories in the 19th century, the Vatican never withdrew from conflict. It learned to fight differently. Instead of raising armies, it funded causes, directed alliances, and influenced leaders. During the Cold War, the Vatican quietly supported resistance against communism. Money flowed into Poland, where Catholic faith became a rallying point against Soviet control. Priests worked as organizers, bishops as messengers. The election of a Polish Pope, John Paul II, strengthened the movement. His words inspired millions, but behind them were years of Vatican planning. The fall of communism was not only political, it was also spiritual, guided in part by a church fighting a silent war. Other conflicts are less noble. In Latin America, during the 20th century, the Vatican often sided with regimes that supported Catholic institutions, even if they were oppressive. Priests who resisted dictators were silenced, while governments that protected church schools received blessing. In Africa, missionaries sometimes found themselves entangled in colonial struggles, where the Vatican's silence favored empires over the people they ruled. These were not holy battles. They were bargains, where survival of influence outweighed justice. The silent wars were also internal. Reformers fought conservatives. Liberation theologians in South America preached a gospel of justice, aligning with the poor against oppressive systems. The Vatican feared their connection to socialist ideas. Warnings were issued, books were censored, priests were silenced. This was war without weapons, doctrinal, political, but just as fierce. Behind every encyclical, every papal speech was not only theology, but strategy. Why keep these wars silent? Because the image of neutrality sustains authority. A church seen as political loses moral power. Yet the truth is unavoidable. The Vatican has always been political. It has fought wars of survival, wars of influence, wars of silence. The faithful are told of prayer and peace. They are not told of money sent to resistance fighters, or treaties signed with dictators, or priests punished for siding with the oppressed. The silent wars matter because they show the Vatican's double life. Publicly, it preaches the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. Privately, it maneuvers like any state, aligning with power, protecting interests, waging battles in shadows. This is the Church's secret battlefield, where prayers and politics collide, and the silence around it is its greatest weapon. Step inside the Vatican museums, and you will see treasures beyond imagination. Ancient statues, Renaissance paintings, golden chalices, jeweled vestments. Tourists marvel, cameras flash, guides speak of beauty and history. Yet what is displayed is only a fraction of what exists. The Vatican is one of the richest institutions in the world. Its wealth spread across art, land, investments, and donations. But the true scope of this fortune is hidden, cloaked in secrecy. This is the shadow of gold. The Church insists it is poor, devoted to service. It points to hospitals, schools, and charities funded by donations. But behind these works lies a fortune few can calculate. Centuries of gifts from kings and nobles filled its coffers. Taxes from peasants in medieval Europe built basilicas. Entire estates were left to monasteries. And war after war, the Vatican gained wealth from land, property, and spoils. Much of this wealth is visible. The gold ceilings of St. Peter's, the priceless works of Michelangelo and Raphael, the relics housed in jeweled cases. Yet these are sacred objects, never to be sold. They are considered beyond price. But elsewhere, the Vatican's wealth flows through banks and investments. Reports have shown billions in real estate across Europe and beyond. Apartment buildings in London, office towers in Paris, land in Rome. These properties generate rent, profit, and influence. Few Catholics lighting candles in their parish realize their donations may fund luxury real estate abroad. The Vatican Bank, too, is central. Known for secrecy, it has faced scandal after scandal, accusations of laundering money, hiding funds for dictators, and shielding accounts of criminals. Each time, reforms are promised. Each time, secrecy remains. The faithful are told the bank serves missions and priests. In reality, it is a financial powerhouse, moving money through global markets, its records rarely shared. Even within the Vatican, wealth is uneven. Some offices struggle for funds, their charities under pressure. Others sit on hidden accounts with millions unspent. Cardinals live in apartments filled with art, while nuns in distant missions beg for supplies. The image of shared sacrifice is a mask. Behind it, gold flows quietly, enriching some while others labor in silence. The Vatican fears exposure of this wealth because it contradicts the gospel it preaches. Jesus spoke of poverty, simplicity, detachment from riches. Yet his church has become one of the greatest landowners on earth. The faithful donate pennies from their wages, while officials manage portfolios worth billions. This contradiction is its shadow, stretching over every sermon about sacrifice, every plea for donations. The shadow of gold matters because it reveals priorities. Wealth is power. Wealth protects. Wealth ensures survival. The Vatican clings to it, guards it, and denies its scale. But the truth is written in stone, canvas, and ledgers. It is not only a church of faith, it is a church of fortune. And its greatest secret is how much more it owns than it ever admits. Every institution has rules. The Vatican has more than most. Some are written in canon law, others are spoken only in whispers. Among these, one rule towers above the rest: silence. From the lowest seminarian to the highest cardinal, silence is demanded, enforced, and praised. It is a doctrine in itself, shaping how the church survives scandal, dissent, and contradiction. This doctrine begins with obedience. Priests vow loyalty to bishops. Bishops vow loyalty to Rome. But loyalty is measured not only in service, but in silence. Speak too much, question too loudly, reveal too openly, and your career ends. Files are sealed, letters destroyed, debates hidden. The faithful hear only the polished version. Behind it lies the silence of thousands. The doctrine is most visible in scandals. For decades, abuse cases were covered by silence, victims told to keep quiet, witnesses warned not to speak, settlements signed with clauses of confidentiality, documents marked secretum pontificium, pontifical secrecy. The reasoning was always the same: to protect the church's image, to prevent scandal, to avoid weakening faith. Yet the result was cruelty. Victims silenced, perpetrators shielded, justice delayed. But silence extends beyond scandal. Theologians who question doctrine are silenced through removal of teaching licenses. Priests who preach controversial ideas are transferred quietly. Bishops who challenge Rome find themselves isolated. Even cardinals must choose their words carefully, lest they lose influence. Silence becomes survival. The Vatican praises silence as humility, discretion, prudence. It quotes scripture, "Be still and know that I am God." But in practice, silence is a weapon. It ensures obedience, prevents rebellion, and hides contradiction. It protects power more than truth. Why call this a doctrine? Because it is taught, lived, and enforced. It shapes every decision. It sustains the image of unity. The faithful see one voice, one teaching, one authority. They do not see the silenced voices, the erased debates, the locked files. They do not see the cost of silence. The doctrine of silence matters because it reveals how the Vatican survives. Not through transparency, but through control of speech. Not through openness, but through secrecy. And until that silence breaks, the Church remains less a community of truth than an institution of guarded shadows. For centuries, the Vatican has claimed to be above worldly politics, devoted to peace, untouched by corruption. But deep inside history's shadows are blood pacts, agreements forged not with ink alone, but with consequences written in suffering, betrayal, and silence. These were not treaties made in daylight. They were bargains sealed behind closed doors, where morality bent under the weight of survival. One of the most infamous came in the early 20th century, when fascist regimes rose across Europe. Mussolini's Italy sought legitimacy, and the Vatican sought independence. The Lateran Treaty of 1929 created Vatican City as a sovereign state, securing the Church's survival after decades of political turmoil. But this pact also gave Mussolini prestige and strengthened his grip on Italy. While Catholics celebrated the Church's independence, many did not see the cost. Silence in the face of brutality, tacit blessing for a regime built on oppression. Another blood pact was forged with Nazi Germany. In 1933, the Vatican signed the Reichskonkordat with Hitler's government, ensuring protection of Catholic rights in exchange for political neutrality. Priests could continue their ministry. Catholic schools could remain open. But the price was silence. As the regime escalated its violence, the Vatican spoke cautiously, rarely naming Hitler or condemning the ideology directly. Behind sermons of general peace lay a calculated choice: survival of the Church over confrontation with evil. Historians still debate whether the Vatican knew the full scope of the Holocaust early on. But the existence of reports, letters, and secret telegrams suggests the truth. Knowledge was there, but silence prevailed. These blood pacts were not only European. In Latin America, military dictatorships often received quiet support from bishops who valued order over rebellion. In exchange, the Church received protection, funding, and influence. Priests who resisted, who aligned with the poor and called for justice, often found themselves silenced, exiled, or worse. Their blood became part of the unspoken cost of deals made in marble halls far away. The Vatican has always defended these choices as pragmatic. Survival requires compromise. Neutrality preserves the ability to act as peacemaker. Better, they argue, to remain present and offer spiritual support than to be destroyed in confrontation. Yet this defense hides the darker truth, that neutrality often becomes complicity, and silence can wound as deeply as violence. Blood pacts are not always written. Some are unspoken, based on mutual understanding. A dictator protects Catholic schools, and the Church does not criticize his policies. A regime donates to church charities, and the Vatican remains quiet about abuses. These unrecorded bargains are harder to trace, but their impact is felt in communities where oppression flourished unchecked. The faithful rarely knew the details. They saw their priests continue to work, their churches remain open, and believed the church stood with them. They did not see the silence as part of the price. The darkest part of these blood pacts is the way they are remembered or forgotten. Official histories often frame them as misunderstandings, as limited agreements in complex times, but the victims remember differently. Survivors of war, persecution, and dictatorship carry scars. They know silence when they hear it. They know absence when they feel it. And they know that survival for an institution can mean abandonment for the people it claims to serve. The blood pacts reveal the Vatican not as a passive observer of history, but as an active player, choosing alliances, weighing costs, and sometimes sacrificing truth for security. They show that holiness does not erase politics, and that power often wins over principle. The faithful are told of eternal values, but behind the veil lies a history of compromises written in blood. The Vatican is filled with doors. Some open into chapels, libraries, or offices where tourists may wander. Others remain closed, guarded by locks and silence. These are the forbidden rooms, spaces that exist but are rarely spoken of, where secrets are kept not only in paper but in walls themselves. To step into them would be to walk into history's hidden heart. One such place is the archive vaults buried beneath St. Peter's. Though officially called archives, they are more like catacombs of knowledge. Endless shelves hold centuries of records, each box labelled, each document waiting. Only a few scholars are allowed entry, and even they see only fragments. Entire sections remain sealed, their contents known only to select officials. Whispers speak of letters from Galileo never published, reports from missionaries describing miracles or atrocities, even early drafts of Gospels that contradict the Bible we know. These forbidden rooms contain not just history, but versions of truth that might alter faith itself. Another forbidden space lies deeper still in the hidden treasury. Gold chalices, jeweled crowns, relics encased in crystal. Some are displayed in museums, but many remain unseen, stored in rooms where only curators and guards may enter. Among them are objects whose authenticity is doubted or whose origins are too troubling to admit. Gifts from tyrants, treasures taken during colonial conquest, artifacts whose possession raises more questions than answers. The faithful are told these objects are sacred. They are not told which ones were stolen, which ones were traded, which ones were hidden away because their stories would embarrass the church. There are also forbidden rooms tied to rituals, chapels where ceremonies are performed only by a handful of cardinals, rites never published, prayers never translated. Some of these are ancient exorcism chambers, where the walls themselves seem scarred by struggle. Others are spaces used for the election of popes, stripped bare of distractions, sealed from outside eyes. The secrecy of these rooms is defended as sacred. Yet the faithful cannot help but wonder what decisions, what bargains, what rituals have taken place behind doors they will never open. Stories circulate of even stranger rooms, chambers where evidence of miracles is tested, where relics are examined, where the Vatican decides whether to declare something divine or dismiss it as false. To enter such a room would be to watch faith and doubt collide, science and belief battling over truth. But these rooms remain closed, their decisions made in silence, their records marked confidential. Why keep these rooms forbidden? Because secrecy protects authority. If everything were open, questions would multiply. Doubts would spread. The Vatican survives by controlling access, by revealing only what strengthens belief and concealing what could weaken it. The forbidden rooms become symbols of this strategy, walls that guard not only objects but narratives. The faithful walk through basilicas and marvel at beauty, never knowing how much more lies just beyond locked doors. They kneel in prayer, unaware that steps away, behind walls they cannot cross, their leaders guard secrets they may never reveal. The forbidden rooms are not simply physical spaces. They are symbols of how truth itself is guarded, how silence becomes architecture, how secrecy is built into stone. The forbidden rooms remind us that faith is not only about what we see, but about what we are not allowed to see. And what remains hidden may change everything we think we know. The Vatican has survived for nearly 2,000 years. Empires have fallen, revolutions have raged, ideologies have risen and died. Yet, the Church remains. How? One reason is its masks, the public faces it wears, carefully crafted for each era, hiding contradictions behind layers of performance. These eternal masks are perhaps its most powerful secret, a survival strategy disguised as holiness. In one age, the Church presented itself as warrior, blessing crusades and sending knights to conquer. In another, it became patron of the arts, commissioning cathedrals, paintings, and music that defined Western culture. Later, it took the mask of diplomat, signing treaties, mediating disputes, positioning itself as moral authority above nations. Today, it wears the mask of global charity, speaking of peace, ecology, and human rights. Each mask is convincing. Each mask reflects some truth, but none shows the whole. Behind the masks, contradictions remain. A church that preaches poverty, yet holds vast wealth. A church that condemns violence, yet benefited from wars. A church that calls for truth, yet silences voices. The masks exist to manage these contradictions, to show the world only what inspires faith and hides what would provoke doubt. Popes themselves wear these masks. Some are remembered as saints, others as reformers, others as philosophers. Each image is cultivated, shaped by speeches, ceremonies, and photographs. The faithful see a holy shepherd. Few see the politician maneuvering behind closed doors, the compromises made, the doubts carried. The mask becomes the man, and history remembers the mask more than the reality. These eternal masks are not only for outsiders, they are for insiders too. Bishops present unity while arguing fiercely among themselves. Documents speak of certainty while debates rage in hidden councils. The mask of unanimity hides the fractures, preserving the illusion of one voice. Why does the Vatican need these masks? Because without them, its contradictions would destroy it. The masks allow survival. They allow it to adapt, to appear timeless while shifting constantly. They protect authority by presenting a face the world wants to see, whether warrior, patron, diplomat, or saint. The truth is too complicated, too human. The mask is simpler, easier to believe. But masks have a cost. They distance reality from appearance. They demand silence from those who see behind them. They create disillusionment when cracks appear, when scandals break, when secrets leak. The faithful realize the mask was not the face, and trust is shaken. The Vatican's survival depends on quickly replacing one mask with another, restoring the illusion, keeping the cycle alive. The eternal masks matter because they show the Church's greatest secret. It has survived not by being unchanging, but by being endlessly changeable, while convincing the world it never changes at all. The faithful pray to an eternal truth, but what they see is an eternal mask, shifting with time, guarding the contradictions beneath. The Vatican speaks often of the keys of Peter, the spiritual authority given to the first pope, passed down through centuries of successors. This symbol, two crossed keys, appears on flags, seals, and coins. It represents power to bind and loose, to open heaven and close it. But alongside the symbolic keys are buried keys, hidden knowledge, suppressed histories, and decisions locked away to protect authority. These are not golden emblems. They are secrets buried deep, keys withheld from the faithful who trust in their leaders. One such key lies in Scripture itself. Over centuries, certain texts were included in the Bible while others were excluded. Councils debated which Gospels, which letters, which prophecies belonged. Many were left out: the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, writings that presented Jesus not as distant king, but as teacher among equals, even elevating women as leaders. These texts exist, translated and studied, but the Vatican has never embraced them. To admit their validity would challenge centuries of doctrine. So the key remains buried. The faithful are told they hold the full truth, while other voices lie silent beneath the floor of history. Another key lies in history's decisions. The Crusades, once preached as holy wars, now remembered with shame. The Inquisition, once justified as defense of faith, now seen as cruelty. The Vatican holds documents, letters, and decrees from these eras, many still locked in archives. They show popes ordering campaigns, bishops enriching themselves, priests condemning innocents. To reveal them fully would mean admitting not only error, but intentional harm. And so the keys remain buried. Apologies are offered in vague terms, but the raw evidence stays hidden. Even more troubling are the buried keys of modern times. Files on abuse cases, known and unspoken. Reports from bishops warning of patterns long before the scandals broke. Letters from victims ignored, shuffled between offices, left unanswered. These documents exist. They could open the door to truth, accountability, healing, but instead they remain sealed, protected by canon law and guarded by the doctrine of silence. The faithful are told the Church seeks justice, but justice without full truth is another locked door. The buried keys are not only documents, they are also questions. Questions of women's ordination, of LGBTQ rights, of clerical celibacy. For each, debates rage inside Vatican walls, but rarely emerge outside. The faithful are told the teaching is fixed, unchanging, eternal. In reality, committees argue, reports are written, even popes wrestle with doubt. The key to open these doors exists: research, evidence, history. But it remains buried, because to lift it would mean changing what was claimed eternal. And change threatens power. Why bury these keys? Because control depends on access. If the faithful knew every contradiction, every hidden decision, every silenced voice, the authority of Rome would fracture. Unity would be threatened. Faith would stumble. That is the fear. And so the keys stay hidden, buried beneath marble, sealed in vaults, spoken only in whispers. The image of crossed keys suggests openness, access to divine authority. But the reality of buried keys suggests something else: selective opening, selective closing, a gatekeeper choosing who may pass. The faithful believe heaven is open to all, but the earthly gatekeepers guard more than heaven. They guard truth itself, deciding what stories are told, what evidence is seen, what questions are answered. The buried keys matter because they show how much remains locked. Faith thrives on trust, but trust requires honesty. Without it, faith becomes fragile. The Vatican's power has endured by keeping these keys hidden, but each buried key is also a weight. And history has shown that buried things do not remain hidden forever. Keys, once found, can open more than doors. They can open eyes. One of the most powerful doctrines of the Catholic Church is papal infallibility, the teaching that the Pope, when speaking ex cathedra on matters of faith and morals, cannot err. To the faithful, this offers certainty. It suggests a rock, a voice guided by the Holy Spirit, a guarantee of truth in a world of confusion. But behind this mask of infallibility lies a different reality. It is less about divine guidance and more about survival, unity, and control. Infallibility was only defined formally in 1870 at the First Vatican Council. The Church was facing upheaval, revolutions in Europe, the loss of the Papal States, the rise of nationalism. To preserve authority, the Vatican declared the Pope's teaching on certain matters free from error. It was a bold move, cementing the Pope as supreme voice in a world where his political power was crumbling. But the definition was narrow, applying only to specific pronouncements. Most Catholics do not realize how rarely it has been invoked. The mask is broader than the reality. Before 1870, popes made mistakes. History records them. Popes led crusades that ended in slaughter. Popes approved inquisitions that condemned innocents. Popes sold indulgences, leading to scandal and the Reformation. Popes quarreled, plotted, even fathered children despite vows of celibacy. None of these acts vanished with infallibility. But the doctrine places a mask over history, suggesting that when it mattered, no error was possible. It creates an aura of certainty where doubt should remain. Even after 1870, the mask has been carefully managed. When a pope speaks on controversial issues, birth control, women in ministry, social justice, his words are presented as nearly infallible, even if not formally declared. The faithful are discouraged from questioning. Scholars who raise doubts risk censure. The mask extends beyond the narrow doctrine into a culture of unquestioned authority. To challenge the Pope is to challenge God. That is the message, repeated until it feels like truth. Yet inside the Vatican, the truth is known. Popes are men. They wrestle with doubt. They seek counsel, argue with advisors, compromise with factions. Some are strong leaders, others weak administrators. Some inspire, others divide. Their decisions are shaped not only by prayer, but by politics, pressure, and fear. The mask of infallibility hides this humanity. It presents the Pope as serene, certain, beyond error. But those who work closest to him know the mask better than anyone. The mask is useful. It preserves unity. If every Catholic believed the Pope could be wrong, division would multiply. The doctrine ensures one voice, one authority, one center. But it also prevents accountability. If the Pope cannot err, then mistakes must be hidden, explained away, or denied. The result is silence, secrecy, and control. The faithful are left with the mask, not the man. The mask of infallibility matters because it shapes how millions view authority. It suggests certainty where none exists. It discourages questioning, even when questions are needed. It places divine weight on human decisions, turning doubt into sin. And while it preserves power, it does so at a cost: the loss of honesty, humility, and humanity. Behind the mask lies a man. Behind the man lies a system. And behind the system lies fear that without the mask, the whole edifice might crumble. Every secret in this book points to one truth. The Vatican is an institution built on layers of silence, lost gospels, forbidden rooms, buried keys, blood pacts, shadowed wealth. Each secret is a veil, thin enough to see light behind it, but thick enough to block the full view. To lift them all would be to expose contradictions too deep, too human. And so the final veil remains. This veil is not a single document or chamber. It is the system itself, the deliberate choice to hide, to control, to shape narratives. It is the recognition that power survives not by telling everything, but by telling only what sustains faith. The Vatican's greatest secret is not any one scandal or ritual. It is the veil itself, woven through centuries, designed to protect the Church from collapse. Consider what happens when the veil slips. When abuse files are revealed, trust collapses. When financial scandals break, donations falter. When prophecies are censored, people wonder what else is hidden. Each broken veil shakes the foundation, not because the truth is unknown, but because the faithful discover they were not trusted with it. The betrayal lies not only in the secret, but in the hiding. The final veil protects contradictions. A church that preaches poverty yet holds immense wealth. A church that demands truth yet practices silence. A church that calls for justice yet signs treaties with oppressors. These contradictions cannot be resolved. They can only be concealed, and so the veil remains, a shield against exposure, a mask of holiness covering human compromise. But every veil weakens with time. Documents leak, testimonies surface, history speaks. The midnight archives cannot stay sealed forever. The forbidden rooms will one day open. The buried keys will be found. When that happens, the faithful will face a choice: cling to the mask or embrace the truth. The Vatican fears this moment more than any scandal. It knows survival depends on the veil. The final veil matters because it shows the Vatican's true nature. Not only a church of God, but an institution of man. It has preserved itself through silence, secrecy, and control. But these tools cannot last forever. The veil is both protection and prison, and when it finally lifts, the church will either collapse under the weight of its hidden truths or be reborn in the light of honesty. Until then, the faithful kneel in pews, candles flicker in chapels, and voices rise in prayer. Above them loom domes and statues, marble and gold. But behind them lies the veil, the greatest secret of all. Not what it hides, but that it hides at all. And as long as it remains, the Vatican's story will always be one of shadows. The Vatican has always claimed to be the guardian of truth, the final arbiter of what is real, what is sacred, what is eternal. But truth inside its walls has never been a simple thing. It has been managed, crafted, and sometimes disguised. The holy deceptions are not lies in the ordinary sense. They are masks wrapped in piety, illusions designed to inspire faith while hiding the frailty beneath. Consider relics. Across centuries, churches displayed bones of saints, fragments of the true cross, even drops of Mary's milk. Pilgrims traveled thousands of miles to see them, kneel before them, offer money to touch them. These relics inspired devotion, miracles, entire economies. Yet the Vatican has long known that many are fakes. Historians found dozens of heads of John the Baptist scattered across Europe, fragments of the cross multiplied beyond possibility. Yet the Church rarely admitted fraud. It allowed the faithful to believe, calling their devotion more important than authenticity. The deception was holy, the illusion considered useful. Art too carried deceptions. Paintings commissioned for altars were meant not just to depict, but to instruct. Artists inserted symbols approved by Rome, guiding the faithful's imagination. But sometimes, these symbols covered contradictions. A pope commissioning a grand painting might appear as a saint in the work, his sins hidden in layers of color. Architecture itself carried deception. Basilicas built on top of pagan temples, the old gods buried under new altars, as though covering them erased their memory. Even miracles carried this shadow. Some were exaggerated, others invented. When a saint's canonization required evidence, stories appeared, healings, visions, wonders that could not be tested. The Vatican investigated, yes, but it also chose what to believe, what to promote, what to doubt. A miracle inconvenient to politics was dismissed. A miracle that served power was embraced. The faithful were rarely told the full story. What mattered was not truth, but usefulness. The greatest holy deception may be in the presentation of unity itself. The Church insists it speaks with one voice, that its teaching is clear, unchanging, eternal. But inside Vatican walls, disagreements rage, councils split, theologians argue, factions form. Decisions are not revelations, but compromises. Yet once announced, they are presented as eternal truth. The faithful never hear of the debates, the drafts, the dissenting votes. They hear only certainty. The deception is not that decisions are made, but that they are presented as beyond doubt. Why maintain these holy deceptions? Because faith is fragile. Leaders believe the faithful need clarity, not confusion. They argue that illusions protect belief, that silence guards souls from scandal. But the cost is trust. When deceptions break, as they inevitably do, believers feel betrayed. They wonder what else has been hidden, what else has been shaped. The truth that was meant to inspire becomes the truth that wounds. The holy deceptions matter because they show that even faith can be curated like a story, shaped for effect rather than honesty. They remind us that what appears eternal may be crafted, What appears pure may be managed, and what appears holy may sometimes be a veil. The faithful kneel before relics, read prayers, hear sermons, believing they hold truth itself. But behind it lies a theatre, carefully staged, where deceptions serve as tools of devotion. Walk through the Vatican at night and the air feels heavy. Marble halls echo, candles flicker, statues stare with hollow eyes. It is easy to imagine the past still alive here. Popes long gone, cardinals whose voices shaped centuries, saints whose bones lie beneath altars. But the true ghosts of silence are not spirits of the dead. They are voices erased, testimonies ignored, cries smothered beneath centuries of secrecy. They are the people whose stories should have been told, but never were. One group of ghosts are the victims of the Inquisition. Their names survive in fragments of records, accused of heresy, witchcraft, blasphemy. Many confessed under torture, their words forced, their beliefs twisted. Families were broken, communities scarred. Their property was seized, their dignity destroyed. And after their deaths, silence. The Vatican rarely speaks of them, except in vague apologies centuries later. Their stories remain buried in archives, their suffering reduced to statistics. They are ghosts not because they haunt, but because they were silenced. Another group of ghosts are the women erased from history. Early Christians included leaders, prophets, deacons, teachers. Some communities revered Mary Magdalene not only as disciple, but as teacher of teachers. But as centuries passed, their voices vanished, their writings suppressed, their roles denied, their memory rewritten. Women became servants, their authority stripped. The silence lingers. Their presence is felt only in fragments, in apocryphal gospels, in inscriptions on ancient stones, in whispers of traditions too strong to kill. They are ghosts because their voices should still echo in churches today, but they do not. Then there are the ghosts of modern times, the victims of abuse silenced by bishops, the priests who tried to expose corruption and were punished, the theologians stripped of teaching rights for asking questions. Each represents a truth buried. Each represents a silence enforced. Their absence is loud, their stories pressing against the walls, waiting to be heard. The Vatican insists it seeks truth, yet its greatest weapon has always been silence. Silence protects authority, silence prevents scandal, silence ensures survival, but silence also creates ghosts. The people silenced do not disappear. They remain in memory, in whispers, in records waiting to be opened. The Vatican fears these ghosts because they demand recognition, justice, change. To acknowledge them would be to admit failure, and failure threatens authority. Why call them ghosts? Because they are present but unseen, felt but denied. They linger in the halls, not as spirits of superstition, but as realities unspoken. Every sealed file is a ghost. Every erased name is a ghost. Every voice denied is a ghost. The Vatican is not only filled with saints and angels, it is filled with ghosts of silence, pressing against the marble, reminding anyone who listens that truth cannot be buried forever. The ghosts of silence matter because they reveal the cost of secrecy. They remind us that what is hidden does not vanish. It waits, it lingers, it shapes the present. The Vatican may try to preserve its image with silence, but in doing so, it builds a haunted house. And one day, the ghosts will speak. Every story in this book, every hidden gospel, forbidden room, buried key, blood pact, mask and silence, points toward one inevitable end: confession. Not the confession whispered in a dark booth, but a confession of the institution itself. A reckoning with centuries of secrets. The Vatican has avoided it for generations, covering each scandal with apologies, reforms, and promises. But beneath all of that lies a final truth. One day, the Church itself will have to confess. Confession is at the heart of Catholic life. A penitent speaks sins aloud, receives forgiveness, and is called to change. But the Vatican has rarely practiced what it preaches. Its apologies are careful, its admissions partial, its reforms limited. It confesses only what is already known, only what cannot be denied. The deeper secrets remain locked, waiting, yet confession delayed is confession multiplied. The weight grows heavier, the silence more unbearable. The last confession would mean opening the vaults, releasing the archives, admitting what was hidden. It would mean acknowledging the blood pacts with dictators, the silenced voices of women, the buried evidence of abuse, the hidden wealth. It would mean admitting not only mistakes, but choices. Choices that harmed, choices that betrayed, choices that protected power over truth. Such a confession would shake the world, but without it, the Church remains trapped behind the final veil. Some within the Vatican know this. They whisper about reform, about the need for honesty, about the danger of secrecy. But fear prevails. Fear of collapse, fear of division, fear of scandal greater than any before. So silence continues, and the last confession waits. The faithful long for it, whether they realize it or not. They want a church that tells truth, even when painful. They want leaders who practice what they demand from others. They want light where shadows linger. Until that comes, faith remains burdened by doubt, by suspicion, by ghosts of silence. The last confession matters because it is the only path to redemption. Not redemption of doctrine, not redemption of ritual, but redemption of trust. Without it, every sermon about truth rings hollow. Every plea for faith sounds false. With it, the Church could become what it claims: a house of light, a guide for souls, a place of truth. But confession requires courage, and courage has often been the Vatican's rarest virtue. When the last confession comes, and it will not be whispered in secrecy. It will be heard by the world, and it will decide the Church's future, whether it collapses under the weight of its hidden past or is reborn in honesty. Until then, the Vatican remains in shadow, guarding its secrets, praying no one asks for more than it is willing to reveal. But confession is inevitable. For just as every penitent must one day speak, so too must the institution that demands it. And when that day arrives, the Vatican will finally face its greatest secret, not what it hid, but why it hid at all. The Vatican claims that its authority comes from God alone, passed through Peter to every pope since. Yet behind this holy image lies a far more complex story. Thrones hidden in shadows, seats of power occupied by figures the faithful rarely see, who shape decisions without ever wearing the crown. These hidden thrones are not carved in marble or decorated with gold. They are made of influence, whispers, and unseen authority. Throughout history, popes have been surrounded by advisors, cardinals, and powerful families. The faithful see one man in white, but behind him stands a network of voices that guide his words. In the Renaissance, noble clans like the Borgias and Medicis placed their relatives in key positions, turning papal elections into political strategies. Entire families rose and fell based on who held power in Rome. The throne of Peter was sacred, but its shadow was crowded with rivals, allies, and puppeteers. Even today, hidden thrones remain. The College of Cardinals elects the Pope, but within it, factions form. Some push for reform, others for tradition. Some prioritize Europe, others Latin America, Africa, or Asia. Deals are struck in whispers, promises exchanged in secrecy. The faithful imagine the Holy Spirit alone guiding the conclave, but the truth is less mystical. Campaigns are run, alliances secured, reputations managed. By the time white smoke rises, the decision has been shaped as much by politics as prayer. Once a pope is elected, his independence is never complete. Curial officials, heads of Vatican departments, hold enormous power. They decide what documents reach the Pope's desk, what policies are emphasized, what scandals are buried. Some popes have tried to rule strongly, but others have been overshadowed by these men in crimson. Behind the papal throne stand other thrones, their occupants less visible but deeply entrenched. Hidden thrones also exist in the financial sphere. Wealthy donors, banks, and secretive funds hold influence over Vatican priorities. When millions are at stake, decisions shift. Missions receive support or neglect, not only for spiritual reasons, but for financial ones. The faithful believe donations serve the poor, but some are funneled into real estate, investments, or political causes aligned with powerful patrons. These patrons, though invisible, sit upon hidden thrones of influence. The darker truth is that even nations have shaped the papacy. Governments have lobbied for candidates, pressured for policies, and demanded silence in exchange for protection. Some popes have resisted, others have yielded. The result is a throne surrounded by shadows, where divine authority is tangled with human ambition. Why hide these thrones? Because to reveal them would fracture the image of unity. The faithful need to see one leader, not a chorus of conflicting powers. The Vatican presents a single voice, but behind it, hidden thrones argue, manipulate, and control. Authority is curated, polished for public view, while the reality remains a labyrinth of competing interests. The hidden thrones matter because they reveal that the Church is not only guided by prayer, it is guided by politics, power, and human ambition. The faithful kneel before one throne, but in truth, they kneel before many, layered in shadows, each demanding loyalty. And the greatest deception of all is the illusion that only one throne exists. The Vatican has never lacked prophets, not only the biblical figures, but visionaries, mystics, and dreamers who claimed to receive messages from God. Some were canonized, their words embraced as divine guidance. Others were silenced, their writings locked away, their names erased. These are the sealed prophets, the ones whose visions were too dangerous, too inconvenient, or too disruptive to reveal. In the early centuries, prophets spoke freely. Communities debated their words, weighed them against scripture, and sometimes accepted them as inspired. But as the church centralized power, prophecy became risky. If God spoke directly to individuals, what need was there for priests and bishops? If visions contradicted official teaching, who held true authority? Slowly, the Vatican began sealing prophets, controlling whose voices were heard and whose were silenced. Take Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century abbess. Her visions of light and cosmic harmony survived because she was respected and because her writings could be framed as supporting church teaching. But for every Hildegard, there were countless unnamed women and men whose visions were dismissed as heresy. Their manuscripts were destroyed, their names forgotten. They were prophets sealed not because they lacked faith, but because their faith threatened the order of Rome. Even saints who became famous were edited. Catherine of Siena challenged popes, demanding reform. Teresa of Avila spoke of mystical union with God beyond clerical control. Their words were preserved, but only after being trimmed, translated, and explained in ways that supported authority. The dangerous edges of their visions were softened. Their radical calls for change were dulled. The prophets were canonized, but their fire was sealed. Modern times hold similar stories. At Fatima, the children's visions were recorded. 2 secrets were revealed, one about war and one about hell. The third was kept hidden for decades. When finally released, it spoke of persecution and assassination, but many believe the full prophecy warned of corruption at the heart of the church itself. If true, then the Vatican sealed not only words, but warnings. In Medjugorje, visionaries have spoken since 1981, drawing millions of pilgrims. Yet the Vatican hesitates, fearing messages beyond its control. Approval has been partial, cautious, carefully managed. The prophets are not imprisoned, but their voices remain under suspicion, their words sealed behind endless investigation. Why seal prophets? Because prophecy is unpredictable. It may call for reform, accuse leaders, or reveal truths that threaten power. It cannot be managed easily. The Vatican prefers prophecy that supports, not challenges. So prophets who speak inconvenient truths are silenced, their writings hidden, their reputations questioned. The faithful are told only what is safe, never what is dangerous. The sealed prophets matter because they remind us that faith is not always guided by divine voices alone. It is filtered through human power. The faithful believe prophecy comes from God, but what they hear has already passed through the hands of men who decide what may be spoken. The voices that could inspire change remain sealed, waiting in silence. And the church continues, pretending their words were never spoken at all. There is a gate in the Vatican that no tourist ever sees. Not a literal gate of stone or iron, but a gate of secrecy, the final barrier between the faithful and the truth. Everything in these chapters, the buried keys, forbidden rooms, hidden thrones, sealed prophets, leads here. The last gate is the Vatican's ultimate defense, the point beyond which no one is allowed to pass, where silence is absolute and truth is untouchable. This gate exists in the archives, where files are marked with seals that forbid opening for 100 years or more. It exists in the walls of forbidden chapels, where rituals are performed only for those sworn to secrecy. It exists in the guarded accounts of Vatican banks, where transactions vanish into coded ledgers. And it exists in the very culture of Rome, where the rule of silence is stronger than any law. The last gate protects the Vatican's greatest contradictions. It hides the depth of its wealth, the compromises of its treaties, the extent of its scandals. It shields the stories of prophets silenced, victims ignored, alliances formed in shadow. It is not built to protect faith. It is built to protect power. Yet the last gate is not impenetrable. History shows cracks. Archives leak. Documents surface. Testimonies emerge. The ghosts of silence press against it, demanding release. Each revelation weakens the gate. Each scandal chips away at its stone. The Vatican repairs it with apologies, reforms, promises of transparency. But the gate always remains, because without it, the institution fears collapse. What lies beyond the last gate? Perhaps manuscripts that would rewrite scripture. Perhaps financial records that prove corruption at the highest levels. Perhaps prophecies warning of downfall from within. Perhaps evidence of choices so dark they could shatter the illusion of holiness forever. No one outside knows for certain. But the very existence of the gate proves the Vatican guards something too dangerous to reveal. The faithful kneel in pews, lighting candles, whispering prayers. They trust their church, believing it leads them toward light. Yet above them, the last gate looms, unseen but present, separating them from truths that could change everything. It is the symbol of all the Vatican hides, not one secret, but the system of secrecy itself. The last gate matters because it reveals the heart of the Vatican's survival. Not faith, not holiness, not unity, but control. It has endured for centuries not by opening doors, but by keeping them closed. And until that gate is broken, the faithful will never know the full story of the church they follow. One day, perhaps, the last gate will open, not by choice, but by time. Locks fail, walls crack, silence ends. When it does, the world will see not only what was hidden, but why it was hidden. And the Vatican will face its greatest trial, to survive not in secrecy, but in truth. Until then, the last gate stands, its shadow cast across history, its silence deeper than prayer, its secret heavier than faith. For most of the faithful, the Catholic Church speaks with clarity. Doctrine is declared, rules are enforced, sermons echo certainty. Yet what few ever see are the secret councils, gatherings where decisions are debated, deals are struck, and the future of the Church is shaped far from public eyes. These are not the great councils of history like Nicaea or Trent, with proclamations carved into doctrine for all to see. These are smaller, hidden councils, unrecorded except in fragments, where whispers outweigh scripture and survival trumps truth. Behind Vatican doors, such councils meet in private chambers, sometimes at midnight, sometimes in ordinary offices stripped of microphones and cameras. The participants are cardinals, bishops, and trusted advisors. They sit not in prayerful circles, but in tight clusters of power. Documents are circulated, votes are tallied, but the records rarely escape. To the faithful, these councils do not exist. To insiders, they are the very heart of how Rome works. Consider the years leading up to Vatican II in the 1960s. Publicly, the council was presented as a bold, new openness, an ecumenical embrace of modernity. But privately, smaller secret councils shaped its direction long before the official gathering. Conservative bishops huddled in one camp, progressive theologians in another. Compromises were negotiated in hidden sessions, texts drafted behind the scenes, alliances brokered across continents. By the time the world saw the documents, the battles had already been fought in secret. Other councils were darker. In the mid-20th century, bishops met quietly to discuss how to handle rising abuse reports. Some argued for openness, others pushed for silence. The decisions made in those secret rooms set patterns of cover-up that lasted for decades. No faithful family lighting candles in church knew such councils existed. But their choices shaped the suffering of thousands. There are councils still whispered about in Rome, gatherings of cardinals planning papal succession years in advance, councils plotting financial survival when scandals loom, councils deciding which bishops must be silenced to protect unity. None of these appear in official records. None are spoken of in sermons, but the fingerprints of their decisions are everywhere. Why keep these councils secret? Because they reveal the truth that doctrine is not pure revelation, but politics. They show that the Church's great decisions are not descended from heaven, but forged in negotiation, compromise, and fear. If the faithful saw the debates, the doubts, the anger, the rivalries, the illusion of unity would shatter. Secrecy becomes essential, not for truth, but for survival. The secret councils matter because they reveal a church that rules not only by scripture, but by shadow. They show how much of faith is curated, shaped, before it ever reaches the ears of the people. And they remind us that the voice presented as one is in fact the echo of many, arguing in silence, deciding in secrecy, shaping the faithful's future without their knowledge. Among all the whispers of hidden manuscripts, none are more haunting than the idea of a lost testament, a text buried deep in the Vatican's vaults that would rewrite everything we think we know about faith. Whether it is a gospel, a letter, or a prophecy, the story repeats across centuries. Something exists, something dangerous, something never shown to the faithful. Legends speak of the Gospel of Mary, a text that describes her not merely as follower, but as teacher. Others whisper of the Gospel of Judas, portraying betrayal not as sin, but as divine mission. These writings exist in fragments, discovered in caves, monasteries, and deserts. But rumors persist that more complete versions lie in Vatican hands. If true, the Church holds a testament it has refused to share, fearful of its power to disrupt. Some believe the Lost Testament could be a record of Jesus' words unfiltered by later editors. Perhaps he spoke more of equality, less of hierarchy. Perhaps he taught secrets about the soul, about death, about the nature of God, that never made it into the Bible. If such a document exists, the Vatican's silence is its greatest weapon. For to reveal it would fracture centuries of certainty, raise questions about Scripture itself, and open the door to interpretations Rome cannot control. Others point to apocalyptic writings, visions of the end times written by early Christians, but never canonized. Some of these predict destruction, not of the world, but of the Church. What if the Lost Testament warns of corruption, collapse, or rebirth beyond papal authority? What if it names the Vatican itself as a power to be overcome? Such a revelation would shake the faithful to their core. There are hints scattered in letters and testimonies. Scholars denied access to certain manuscripts in the archives. Mentions in footnotes of catalogues. Vague descriptions like various apocryphal texts. Even popes have occasionally hinted at deeper truths, withheld for the sake of stability. Yet no one outside the inner circle knows for sure. The lost testament, if it exists, remains locked away, its silence louder than any sermon. Why would the Vatican hide such a thing? Because control of Scripture is control of faith. If other voices of Jesus exist, if other interpretations are possible, then the authority of Rome weakens. The Church survives by presenting one story, one truth, one canon. A testament outside that canon threatens everything. The lost testament matters because it represents the possibility that what we know is not all there is. It symbolizes every hidden manuscript, every silenced prophet, every erased history. It stands as a reminder that faith has always been curated, and that behind the polished story may lie a raw, unfiltered truth, too dangerous to reveal. Until it is opened, if it ever is, the lost testament remains the greatest mystery of all, a silence that haunts the very heart of belief. Every secret, every silence, every deception in the Vatican ultimately serves one purpose: to protect the illusion of eternity. The Church presents itself as timeless, unchanging, rooted in truths beyond history. Cathedrals rise, popes die, empires fall, yet the Vatican endures, draped in the veil of eternity. But this eternity is not what it seems. It is a veil carefully woven, fragile beneath its weight, covering contradictions too deep to expose. The veil tells the faithful that doctrine never changes, yet history shows otherwise. Teachings have shifted, adapted, reversed. Slavery once tolerated, now condemned. Usury once forbidden, now ignored. Religious freedom once denied, now embraced. The veil covers these changes, presenting them as continuity, as if the Church had always known, always been right. The veil tells the faithful that holiness is unbroken, yet scandals reveal corruption at every level. Popes fathering children, bishops hoarding wealth, priests abusing power. Each time, the veil is repaired with apologies, reforms, promises, but the stains remain beneath. The veil tells the faithful that the Vatican stands apart from politics. Yet history reveals pacts with emperors, dictators, and kings. Silence traded for survival, blessings given for power. The veil reframes these as prudence, as neutrality, as divine wisdom. But the truth is compromise, bargains made in shadow. What makes this veil so powerful is its persistence. Generation after generation, it convinces millions that the Church is eternal, untouched by time, shielded from error. It gives comfort, stability, certainty, and perhaps that is why it survives. Because people long for something eternal in a world of change. The Vatican knows this longing and feeds it, even if it must weave the veil from silence and secrecy. But eternity cannot be built on shadows forever. Every veil frays, every silence cracks. The more the Vatican hides, the more fragile the illusion becomes. Eternity presented as unchanging truth is, in fact, constant adaptation covered by secrecy. The veil is both its strength and its weakness, a cloak of stability that conceals the chaos beneath. The veil of eternity matters because it reveals the Vatican's greatest paradox. It has survived for centuries, not by being eternal, but by pretending to be. Its power comes not from truth alone, but from control of perception. It guards its secrets not only to hide corruption, but to preserve the illusion that it never changes. When the veil finally lifts, and it will, the faithful will see not eternity, but humanity, not divine perfection, but human struggle, not unbroken truth, but centuries of compromise. The question is whether faith can survive without the veil, whether people can still believe once they see the shadows that held their trust. The Vatican fears this moment. That is why the veil is guarded so fiercely, why secrets are buried, why silence is defended. The veil is its final protection, its greatest secret, its most fragile illusion. It promises eternity. But eternity built on silence is nothing more than a veil waiting to fall. The Vatican calls itself a city-state, a speck of land barely half a square kilometre in size, no larger than a modest neighbourhood in any capital city. Yet in reality, it is an empire of shadows, stretching far beyond Rome's walls, woven into the fabric of nations, governments, and corporations. This empire is not measured in soldiers or land, but in influence, wealth, and silence. It is an empire hidden behind prayer and ritual, yet powerful enough to shape history itself. The empire began centuries ago when popes commanded kings and crowned emperors. Though that visible power has faded, the invisible one has only grown. The Vatican today holds diplomatic relations with more than 180 countries, more than most nations on earth. Ambassadors come and go, treaties are signed, secrets exchanged. Its diplomatic corps is one of the most experienced in history, trained in discretion, masters of whispers. When crises erupt, wars, revolutions, scandals, the Vatican knows before most governments. It listens not through satellites or spies, but through its network of priests, missionaries, and bishops scattered across every continent. This global network forms the backbone of the empire. Every diocese, every parish, every school is more than a spiritual center. It is also an information channel, a node in a vast web of reports that flow back to Rome. Priests hear confessions, bishops collect data, nuncios deliver updates. The Vatican insists it uses this network only for pastoral care, but history shows it has been used for far more, to track political shifts, to monitor dissent, to influence decisions in parliaments and palaces alike. Money flows through this empire just as strongly. The Vatican owns property across Europe, from luxury apartments in London to entire blocks in Paris. It holds investments in banks, companies, and even industries it publicly condemns. Reports have surfaced of Vatican-linked funds tied to weapons manufacturers, gambling enterprises, even pharmaceuticals. Official statements deny involvement, but the paper trails tell another story. In this empire of shadows, profit often outweighs purity. The Vatican Bank itself is legendary for secrecy. Officially called the Institute for Works of Religion, it was created to serve missionaries and charities. But over decades, it became a hub for laundering money, hiding assets, and moving funds across borders without scrutiny. In the 1980s, scandals revealed links between the bank, the mafia, and corrupt politicians. Bankers were found dead, hanging beneath bridges, their pockets filled with cash. Each time, the Vatican promised reform. Each time, secrecy remained. The faithful continued donating coins and bills, unaware their offerings flowed into one of the most secretive financial institutions on earth. The empire of shadows also extends into politics. In Latin America, the Vatican has shaped revolutions and resisted them, depending on which side protected its interests. In Africa, it has influenced elections, sometimes supporting leaders who maintained Catholic dominance, even when corruption was clear. In Europe, bishops have swayed referendums, pressured parliaments, and quietly dictated social policies. And in the United States, Catholic lobbies, backed by Rome, have shaped debates on education, healthcare, and morality. The empire does not need armies. Influence is its weapon. What makes this empire invisible is its mask. To the faithful, the Vatican is a small city, humble and holy. Its marble halls echo with prayers, not power. Its leaders wear robes, not uniforms. But behind the mask, decisions ripple across continents. Politicians know this. Dictators fear this. Corporations court this. And the faithful rarely suspect it. Why keep this empire hidden? Because to admit its scale would betray its image. A church that preaches humility cannot also be seen as a global empire. So it cloaks its reach in spirituality, disguising power as service, influence as neutrality. The faithful are told the Vatican exists only to guide souls. Yet behind the veil lies an empire whose reach rivals that of any nation, an empire of shadows whose secrets weigh heavier than gold. The empire of shadows matters because it reveals that the Vatican is not merely a church. It is a power among powers, ruling without ruling, influencing without accountability. The faithful kneel at altars, but behind those altars stretches an empire whose decisions shape the world. And the greatest deception of all is that it pretends not to exist. Throughout history, faith has often been strengthened by symbols, objects said to carry divine power, relics that connect believers to heaven, miracles that prove God's hand in the world. But when these symbols are false, when the relics are forged and the miracles staged, they become not signs of truth, but instruments of manipulation. The Vatican has long walked this line, embracing relics and miracles that inspire devotion while ignoring or concealing doubts about their authenticity. These sacred hoaxes have drawn millions to prayer, but they have also built an empire of belief upon fragile foundations. Take the Shroud of Turin, perhaps the most famous relic in Christian history. Believed by many to bear the image of Christ himself, it has drawn pilgrims for centuries. Scientists have tested it repeatedly, and results have been inconclusive or contradictory. Some carbon dating suggests it was created in the Middle Ages. Others argue it defies explanation. The Vatican has never declared it authentic, but it has also never dismissed it. Instead, it carefully maintains the mystery, allowing faith to flourish regardless of truth. The shroud may be hoax or miracle, but the Vatican profits from its power. The same is true of countless relics scattered across Europe, bones of apostles found in multiple cities, fragments of the true cross enough to build a ship, vials of blood that liquefy on command, drawing crowds of the faithful. Some of these relics may be genuine, many cannot be. Yet the Vatican rarely corrects the record. It allows the faithful to believe, insisting that faith, not fact, is what matters. The deception becomes sacred when it is wrapped in ritual, blessed by authority, and hidden beneath the language of mystery. Miracles, too, carry shadows. For every healing declared authentic, dozens more are quietly dismissed. Some claims are exaggerated by local priests, others manipulated by those seeking power or profit. The Vatican investigates, but its methods are secretive, its criteria flexible. A miracle that strengthens devotion may be promoted, even if doubts remain. A miracle that threatens control is ignored, even if evidence is strong. The faithful never see the debates. They see only the final decision, stamped with papal approval. The most troubling sacred hoaxes are those deliberately staged. History tells of weeping statues later found to contain hidden tubes, of visions encouraged by priests for political ends, of exorcisms exaggerated for dramatic effect. In each case, the faithful were moved to tears, convinced they had witnessed divine power. Only later, if ever, did the truth emerge. By then, the faith inspired could not be undone. The Vatican rarely admitted error. Silence preserved the illusion. Why tolerate these hoaxes? Because faith thrives on wonder. Miracles inspire devotion, draw pilgrims, fill coffers. Relics create pilgrimage routes, strengthen loyalty, and bind people to Rome. The Vatican fears that exposing fraud would weaken belief. Better to let the illusion stand, even if it rests on deception. Better to call it mystery, to blur the line between truth and hoax, than to risk unraveling the fabric of faith. The sacred hoax matters because it reveals the danger of mixing truth with illusion. Faith built on mystery can inspire, but faith built on deception corrodes trust. The Vatican may believe it protects souls by allowing hoaxes to stand. But in truth, it builds a fragile house, one that cracks each time light is shined upon it. And one day, the sacred hoax will collapse under the weight of its own secrecy, leaving believers to wonder what was ever real at all.